Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Есть.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 961 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And today we've heard some very massive destruction in Pokrovsk, and also some federal Russian agents have been found not breathing inside of Russia. Not a good thing for them, but it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and also the ongoing escalations that are still happening inside of the Middle East today, as we've been able to get major news that a Russian attack today towards the city of Pokrovsk met a meat grinder and was completely slaughtered and stopped, with video and picture evidence clearly showing that the entire attacking force turned around and ran for the hills as fast as they possibly could. The entire offensive ended up being chalked up as a failure and a complete defeat for the Russian Federation today on the battlefield. We were also able to get major news, possibly of the upcoming blood feud from Ramzan Kadyrov as we move down to the border near Chcchnya. Today, a shocking statement came out that 3 Russian government officials, most likely affiliated with the FSB, were killed today by unknown gunmen right across the Chechen border. It is believed that this may possibly be the beginning of Ramzan Kadyrov's blood feud, and the death of these Russian federal officers may be some sort of a message being sent that larger uprisings and larger hostile actions will be taken unless if the supposed assassin plotters are handed over to the Republic of Chechnya to be held, I guess you could say, accountable for the plot that they were trying to conduct. We have also been able to hear some...
And this is a hell of a blood feud, by the way, if they're running around just getting random people in Ingushetia, like going after random FSB agents. That's just like I guess, random attack to, like you said, send a message. I guess it's kind of random.
Man, they had a drive-by bliating down there, man. They just sat there and like bliated up a couple of FSB officers and called it a night. It's one hell of a thing, but like we'll get into it though in a little bit because it's an interesting story even on the little bit that we have so far. But not only that, we were also able to see that up in the area of the Kursk Oblast, Ukrainian forces are continuing their actions against the Russian Federation in pretty decent form. We were actually able to see the 82nd Airborne Brigade involved in combat operations against the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade near to the area of Bolshoi Soldatskoye. A very interesting thing to see at that. We were also able to see major combat actions happening throughout the front lines inside of Ukraine entirely, and we were also able to see that drone alerts were issued to the entirety of the Voronezh Oblast today, which is one of the first times that we've ever seen this, and once again showing that Russian air defense is really starting to suffer quite heavily at this point of the war. But we have loads of news to cover today, an insanely high amount, and some incredibly interesting stuff at that as well. So moving us on into the first bit of news that we have for tonight, probably the craziest piece of news coming out of the battlefields at Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk has been a fairly major battlefield for the past few months, especially after the Ukrainians got pushed out of Avdiivka at the earlier part of this year. The Russian Federation has continuously been trying to push further and further west into Ukraine and towards the city of Pokrovsk, and this time, this city actually does have strategic value. The city of Pokrovsk is a city that sits on the major crossroads within this area of Donetsk, and largely can be considered a logistical and command anchor point for the entire southern command of the Ukrainian forces that are currently within the remainder of the Donetsk Oblast. The Russian Federation plans on attempting a capture of the city of Pokrovsk and using it as their own supply base, also command base, to conduct further offensive operations into the rest of the very little that will remain in this area of the southern Donetsk Oblast and capture the remainder of it, so that way Russia can achieve its combat goals of capturing the entirety of the Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts. From what we understand, the Russians have largely been stopped in their tracks in this area for about roughly a month at this point in the Pokrovsk direction, and Russian forces have been trying time and time again to probe the Ukrainian defenses and figure out a weak spot where they can punch through and then start to have a greater deal of success trying to make it towards the city of Pokrovsk. And today was certainly not that day. It appears that the Russians have been conducting probing attacks for about 2 to 3 weeks at this point, which is why there hasn't been an incredibly high amount of combat action as they started to hit some pretty heavy Ukrainian defenses. And today it seems that they believed, at least initially, that they have finally found the weak spot that they were looking for and decided to try and penetrate that area of the line, breaking through and making their way to Pokrovsk. That is not the way it went. Getting y'all into our first clip, we can of course see that the Russians were immediately met at the start by Ukrainian FPV drones striking and knocking out some of the forward Russian vehicles in this area. And we can see one of the FPV drones targeting and destroying a Russian armored vehicle. It looks like it is a BTR, if we can see that correctly here, that they're going to slam this drone down on top of. And there it goes.
One very unfortunate Russian in the top who's going to become charbroiled like a fuse.
Man, I'm telling you what, man, he's going to get absolutely cooked like some shashlik, and he was cooked. You can see the entire vehicle was destroyed, and that thing is gone. It is absolutely gone. And it is beautiful to see this, as this was one of the opening actions today of this Russian offensive that was attempting to break through the Ukrainian lines. Our next clip also showed the Ukrainians, well actually really quickly we'll get back to that in a little bit, we actually got to see more Russians getting hit by the 68th Brigade, including a BM-21 Grad, a tank, and also I believe a towed artillery piece as well. These are largely support units. You can see the Grad getting obliterated right there in a nuclear fireball. These are largely support units that were being brought forward to try and support the Russian offensive today, and it seems as though a lot of them ended up getting destroyed before they were ever even getting close to being effective at all on the battlefield. A very good sign, and once again showing us that the Ukrainians really were on the ball as far as their intelligence gathering operations near this area and trying to figure out what the Russians were about to be planning or what the Russians were going to be trying to execute within the very near future. We can see them hitting even more Russian vehicles, once again going up into near massive fireballs. And we see right there another vehicle being slammed. Once again, an incredibly unfortunate occurrence, especially for these poor, pesky Russians. And we can see the fireball dissipating out there in the distance. And that's the end of the clip, but still showing us what the 68th Jaeger Brigade had been up to today, once again making sure to knock out Russian forces as much as they possibly could. We then also got to see that an MTLB within the area was also hit by a Ukrainian FPV drone as well, and quickly destroyed, with the rear cab, largely where the fuel is stored, catching on fire immediately and spreading the flames through the remainder of the vehicle, completely burning it out in less than 15 minutes. This was what they call an instant cooking, right there on the battlefield. This is like the pressure cooker, the instant cooker. This is KFC's Kentucky Fried Chicken in the boiling vessel right there on the battlefield. And boy, is it tender. I would say finger licking good.
Man, that was a terrible place to put that, by the way, right along that tree line. It was basically not disguised at all. It was sitting right out in the open.
Man, you know something that's actually pretty funny, man? I just thought of this. Like, my brain isn't working right now on these, but you know when that thing got hit, man, you know some Russian off in the tree line in the distance watching that thing get hit? He looked at it and he went, wow, look at that boiler.
Oh, man, look at that toiler. Man, you haven't brought that joke out in such a long time. I forgot all about that one.
Man, I forgot it. Man, I forgot about it while the lag is just hitting us like, no, tomorrow. I completely forgot about that until now. And I was like, oh, that's a great joke. We should bring that up right now. And moving on from that and on into our next bit. And also let me make sure, yeah, the internet, yeah, we're going to have to fix the whole internet situation hopefully soon, Matthew, because it just looks like this internet can't really keep up with it. But moving on from that, we did also get to see that the Ukrainians then began a counterattack after the Russian attack started to kind of peter out a little bit, and we were able to see the 425th Battalion was able to conduct a successful assault in the area of Novokhorodivka and was able to start pushing the Russians back within this direction right after their counterattack had failed. And we can see that the Ukrainian vehicles are immediately running up to the tree line. We can see the Ukrainian soldiers now dismounting and preparing for the firefight that is soon to follow with the Russians that are right inside of that tree line. We now see the Ukrainian armored vehicle pulling away and further on back towards Ukrainian lines as the Ukrainian infantry now conduct their job of clearing out the Russian forces and now pushing on into their positions, making sure to push them back in this counterattack. This is a fairly wise move by Ukrainian commanders on the battlefield, as the Russian attack today did start to lose a lot of momentum and speed quickly due to the massive losses that they had taken, at least compared to the attacking force, and for this reason they were going to be heavily disoriented and disorganized. The Ukrainian commanders on the battlefield within this area immediately executed a counterattack meant to completely disorganize and rout the enemy forces that were now stuck in a disadvantageous position on the battlefield and force them into a retreat back towards their original lines, or to even give up ground at the end of the assault. And we can see them here continuing to slam Russian positions. We can also see a Ukrainian right here lobbing a grenade into a building held by the Russians. The grenade goes off here in a second right there, probably clearing out the Russians inside. No one likes grenades. That's the one party favor you just never want to see.
You know, they used to come in many flavors. They used to come in pineapple, too, back in the day when the Germans used to have some.
Man, you know, the Germans used to have those potato masher things, you know? Like, they would make sure to give you the kitchen utensils that you need.
They used to have handles on their grenades, you know, to make them easier to throw.
Man, they used to have a lot of things on the grenades, and now the grenades are nothing more than a baseball-shaped object. How much the mighty grenade has fallen. It's a very sad thing to think about. Just very unfortunate overall, but still, we have to live with the fact that grenades will just never be as cool looking as they once were. But still, nice to see the Scala conducting a successful counterattack.
I think, honestly, I would have to take the grenade with the handle on it over the one with just, like, the normal, like, handheld type.
Man, I'm telling you what, man, I'd agree with you completely there. But moving on from that, we also did get to see that Russian forces began to retreat off of the battlefield after the Ukrainian Scala unit conducted its counterattack. We were able to see that Russian vehicles were retreating from the area and were also still being hit by Ukrainian fire, this one being hit by the 46th Brigade, which was in the area at the time. And we see the tank right there as the drone is coming on down, slamming right into the side of the tank, right there. Boom! Hitting it dead on the nail. And also, let's see here. Someone's saying who's over-talking who. Matthew, how long is the lag? Like, I'm start talking as soon as I stop talking on your end, which should be right now.
Okay, so I'm talking literally right after you said something.
So there's like a 3-second delay. So that's interesting to know right there. So we'll have to try and keep that in mind as we go forward. But nevertheless, as the lag hits again, and Matthew, I got to tell you, man, this internet solution there was a solution, like it's the only one we had, but we're going to have to try and fix this soon. Sorry about that, everyone. We're trying our best. Let's see here. Someone put in all caps. Wi-Fi is not recommended for streaming. Plug a cable from your router to your systems. I don't think you understand, and I want to explain this very clearly because we tried to explain this as much as we can. This is the best that we can do for right now. We are trying to work on a long-term solution to this, but I want y'all to keep in mind that Enforcer Studio 2.0 literally got set up on a moment's notice, and we did not have any pre-prep or planning going into this. There is no fiber optic cables to plug into this studio at the moment. We are currently trying to get that set up, so please bear with us if there are any difficulties instead of screaming at us to plug a router and an Ethernet cable together, because we don't have a router and an Ethernet cable to be able to plug into each other right now. So we are trying to work with the best.
I think the lag is worse on our end. I think the lag is worse on our end than it is on the audience's end, because it looks like most people don't really notice the lag at all, but it's pretty much on our end.
It does seem like it probably is on our end because I'm seeing a lot of people saying it's perfectly fine. But still, once again, I do want to explain that just a little bit so that way we can make sure to get y'all a little bit of an idea of what's going on behind the scenes. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on down into the very southern end of the Pokrovsk offensive, where we were also able to see that near to Staromykhalivka, a tank from the Ukrainian 59th Brigade was hammering Russian positions in this area and attempting to hold them down while the Russians in the north were getting absolutely slaughtered. We can see the tank from the 59th firing in the field right here into the buildings on the very side of this village, making sure to pin down the Russians in this area and stop them from taking the initiative and trying to join the forces in the north on the offensive that was conducted today.
And they are salt and peppering this area. It's getting splattered.
Man, I'm telling you what, man, they are adding a lot of that salt and pepper. They call it paprika sometimes, and I believe the Russians have a special word for it, which is called, well, it's called getting diddied out there, and I have a feeling that they are probably, they're probably having a freak off, but not in a good way. I don't think Diddy's way was a good way either, but theirs is certainly not a good way. But moving on from that, we are able to see that the battlefield analysis in this area is quite well. Currently, the Ukrainians are on the defensive on this battlefield and have been for about a half year at this point, and from what we understand, they are still able to maintain a good defensive posturing, and not only that, they are losing very little or no ground currently. The Russians did attempt another offensive today, and once again ran into a brick wall as far as the Ukrainian defenses go, so overall, it does seem as though the Ukrainian defenses are very effective at this moment, and Pokrovsk will hold for an incredibly long time and may even hold indefinitely, although, of course, we will have to wait and see on that one. But nevertheless, very nice to see, and hopefully we will be able to see even more news and better news and long-lasting news coming out of this area to once again show that the Ukrainian defensive is holding incredibly well. But while the Ukrainian defensive is holding well, other things are not holding up too well, and that's Chechen-Russian relations. Now, the Chechens can do all kinds of things. They can crush people's heads with sledgehammers, they can have incredibly salacious relationships with goats, they can also have incredibly questionable relationships with other Russian soldiers, although some of those Russian soldiers didn't want to have those relationships at all, and all of those things are fine, according to Putin. Everything is A-okay, because the Chechens are here to get on TikTok and do absolutely nothing. But one thing is very interesting. We did cover yesterday that 3 Russian lawmakers in the State Duma were apparently planning some sort of an assassination attempt against Ramzan Kadyrov, and Ramzan Kadyrov and the Akhmat was able to uncover this, and they published this information today. We now have heard that right across the border from Chcchnya, and this is the border in between Chechnya and Ingushetia, we were able to hear that 3 Russian officers have been killed today, and we're going to give you all the information that we have at the moment, and also the clips. Ingushetia in Russia, 3 officers from the Center for Combating Extremism were shot and killed on a federal highway near the entrance to Magas. The assailants, who arrived in a VAZ 99 car, fled the scene after the attack. There are also reports of the disappearance of Adam Kemkoev, the deputy of the Center E in Ingushetia. This incident comes amid heightened tensions following remarks by Ramzan Kadyrov about alleged assassination plots against him and a blood feud. In response, Ingushetian authorities have warned residents against reacting to provocative calls and urged them to think critically and not be driven by emotions. Now, it's time for us to get into those delicious clips, so check this out. Well, you see right here, the cops have shown up to the shooting that happened. We didn't get any clips of the actual
shooting. Can you enlarge it a little bit, please?
Yeah, sure. We can enlarge it a little bit. There you go.
Man, a drive-by bleeding. You don't see this very often, especially on FSB agents. This is somewhat unusual.
Man, you just don't see this a lot at all. Like, this is actually wildly rare, and this is why we do believe that it is connected to the blood feud entirely. We actually believe that pretty much from the onset of hearing this, and it was also, once again, echoed in War Translated. So it does seem as though everyone's on the same page. This looks a lot like it has something to do with the blood feud that was announced yesterday. We were also able to see additional footage from the ground, once again showing the scene where the shooting occurred. We can hear the police siren that sounds like a fart, a poorly timed fart at that. Man, imagine having a cop roll up to the scene and it sounds like their car is taking a fat crap, like, as it's coming in. Like, that's not a good thing. Listen to this.
Man. Like, what are they showing up for anyway? It's not like the Russians actually save anybody from these things.
Nah, man, everyone's already dead.
Oh,
I mean,
someone's pulling out.
Dude, someone was about to conduct another drive-by bleeding right there. Listen to this.
Oh, jeez.
But that's the end of that clip right there. And moving on from that and into our next one, we got one last clip here from the area near to the shooting. So here's the clip as well.
Oh, look, a brand new Lotto.
Dude, what is that license plate? H305AE126. What? I'm not even going to ask about how Russians actually work their license plates. I don't know, but I always think they look so goofy. Like, European license plates make a good bit of sense because it's just a mixture of numbers and letters. But then they have a letter, a number, then a 2-letter set, and then a 3-letter set. I'm not getting like how the identification system for the license plates works in Russia, but maybe we'll find out one day. But it is a brand new Lada, complete with like no amenities, like no air conditioning, no radio. You just have a steering wheel and maybe 2 gear shift, two different gears in the transmission and maybe 36 horsepower. But still, it is Russian made, which really means a lot these days.
This person must be like a diplomat or something. They're not in the Sunbun, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Man, lay on that horn, would you? Look at it. It's like, come out with your hands up. Come out with your hands up.
man, they're sitting there with a megaphone pointed at the dead officers on the ground, and they're like, we're just wondering, are y'all okay? Do y'all need any medical assistance? Let us know. Just something like that. It's like, man, I don't even know what the hell that guy would be saying. Like, it's so muffled you can't even recognize it as Russian. It's just, he's just trying to sound
He said,
busy.
we will not be paying any death benefits. You can forget it right now. We're not paying a dime.
Dude, he sat there and he got on that megaphone right there, man. He said in Russian, if your loved one has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, you may be entitled to financial compensation. Or something like that. It's like, dude, it's like
Call for my miso book.
Dude, one of the guys who was dead on the ground, he lifted up his head when he heard that. He said, "Oh, the real shit." It's like, yeah, man, you can go get your benefits. But anyways, that's the end of that clip right there, and it is once again very, very interesting, closely timed to what Kadyrov said yesterday, literally right across the border in Chechnya, and it's leading us to believe that this shooting may have been inspired or even sponsored and supported by Ramzan Kadyrov in the Chechen government. Once again, I do want to put this out there. We're not entirely sure about that, and we're still trying to get more information about what happened with this shooting beyond the fact it happened. But it does seem as though, considering that these officers, all 3 of them were in the FSB in the specific department dealing with extremism, and Chechnya's actions just yesterday may be producing an additional level of extremism in the area. This may actually be some sort of a low-level decapitation attempt by the Chechen government to try and make sure that the Russians are really caught off guard in this area, instead of just, you know, kind of getting a really good idea of what's about to be coming around the corner and then reacting to it in perfect timing. We have a lot of questions about what's been going on down here and what happened today with the killing of these 3 FSB officers. And I want to remind y'all again, the killing of FSB officers is pretty freaking rare, and also it's a pretty big deal. To put this out there again, the FSB is the modern day KGB. It literally is just the KGB rebranded. So the fact that 3 agents that are directly involved with the Russian KGB, we'll call it that because a lot of people know the KGB a lot better than the FSB, the fact that 3 of them got killed in some sort of a shooting and they had the information to know where these people were at that specific moment and to kill those people within that specific department raises a lot of eyebrows and shows that there probably is some sort of a higher level of involvement or planning that was conducted here for this shooting to happen, probably by someone that actually was an insider in the Russian government and would have access to that information. But a lot of people have been throwing in a lot of their opinions on this, and we just asked you all the question. 3 Russian federal officers of the FSB have been killed after Kadyrov called for a blood feud. And a lot of people have been putting in their thoughts. Is this related to Ramzan Kadyrov, or is it not? Is this just something to do with another fringe group in the area, like the Ingushetian Liberation Army, which we already know of, and it's largely funded and supported by Ukraine within Ingushetia, which may also be another group that tried to conduct this target? Or is it an attack that was sanctioned by Kadyrov himself against a specific department in the FSB to try and start decapitating or purging people he believes are attempting to kill him? A load of people have weighed in on this, and it seems as though everyone is in the same kind of a thought group on this one. And Matthew, what are you thinking about it, and what is everyone else thinking about it? Was this entirely Kadyrov, or could this have been someone else that's in a different group?
So it looks like about 74% of the audience said it is 100% connected to Kadyrov and his quote-unquote blood feud that he just announced the other day, while 20% said maybe so, but I need some more information before we can actually attribute it to Kadyrov's involvement, and 3% said it's entirely not related at all. And I have to say on this one, I'm with the Enforcer. It is very rare for FSB officers to be killed in any capacity whatsoever. So that is very unusual. And considering that Kadyrov literally just declared a blood feud, and honestly, we don't know what a blood feud really even is. It's just him saying that he wants to go out and basically hurt some Russians because he feels like he's been wronged. But honestly, I don't think anybody really knows what that even really means in like reality. So this could be that blood feud that he was talking about, and he's starting his campaign of terror or violence by going out here and taking out some FSB agents. It could be sending a message, or this could be 3 guys that were actually involved in the alleged assassination attempt against Kadyrov's life a while back, leading to the calling of a blood feud. So I don't really know, but I would say this probably is not random chance or random coincidence, because for FSB agents to get taken out, that is a very, very unusual. But I'm with the 73%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it probably is connected to Kadyrov. Now, there is a lot to be said about this Caucasus, the Caucasus Mountain region. And that is correct, Matthew. It is the Caucasus Mountain. I'm going to have to go type this up. I always get confused with this. So the Caucasus... it's the Caucasus. The Caucasus Mountain region within southern Russia is an incredibly volatile and dangerous place. To be entirely honest with y'all, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. There are loads of groups down here that are very unhappy with the Russian government, and there are also a lot of nefarious organizations that have still existed in southern Russia that have been completely destroyed elsewhere. And I'm actually going to mention one of them because this is one that actually plays a decent role within the area, and then I'll mention a couple of others that are kind of like it. There is a group that used to exist in the Middle East in the mid-2010s that was the absolute fear of everyone in the world. It became the source of loads of memes, and it also became the source of the next target for the war on terror. And everyone knows the group I'm talking about. It's ISIS. Now, ISIS was largely destroyed around mid to late 2018 as an international coalition came together to support the Iraqi and Syrian Democratic Forces in crushing and destroying any physical presence of ISIS within the region. And for that reason, ISIS, at least in its original main cell, has largely died and probably will never come back again. But it's completely different elsewhere, because there are little splinter groups of ISIS that still survive, and one of them actually lives within southern Russia, and that group is called ISIS-K. And ISIS-K is, like its original father group, a Islamic radical faction that supports the idea of conducting war against anyone that is not Islamic in the support of some sort of an Islamic state or a brand new caliphate within the area of Iraq and Syria, or as they call it sometimes, the Levant, which is also why you'll hear it sometimes referred to as ISIL if you ever listened to the information about it back in the past, because the Levant included Syria and also a couple of other places. But beyond that, that is the group that does exist within southern Russia. And that was actually the one that ended up conducting the uprising against the Russian government in Dagestan, in the major cities of Makhachkala and also the town of Izerbash and Kayakin way back in the day. And many of y'all remember that we covered that, and it was a major armed conflict in the area, and that was entirely an uprising by ISIS-K. And ISIS-K, just to put this out there, largely operates in Dagestan, also within the hills of Chechnya in the very southern region near the Georgian border, and they also operate within Ingushetia, and also, let me try and think of the other ones, because there's another one a little bit further west of that. It's not Dagestan, let me think of it. I can't think of the name of it, but it's another one of the little semi-autonomous republics down here, and they also operate within that area as well. Then there's another group which actually popped up in the Ukraine war called the Ingushetian Liberation Army, which is a group that believes in the idea of an independent Ingushetian state for the Ingushetian people due to the oppression and general roughshotting that they've been getting by the Russian government ever since the times of Stalin. This group actually was created by the Ukrainian state Rada, by a member of the Rada, and is largely funded and supported by the Ukrainian government. And they have been the ones conducting armed uprisings against the Russian government since about late 2023. That's when we first heard of their existence, and since then we've seen 2 uprisings that have been conducted by the Ingushetian Liberation Army, and each time they've actually consumed a decent amount of Russian resources and manpower within short stints as they try to deal with this uprising and put it down. And there's loads of other groups like this within the Caucasus Mountain region. But nevertheless, even with all of these groups in the area, they very rarely, if ever, have actually conducted coordinated, really pinpoint attacks like this on FSB officials or anyone conducting what would be called in Russia a counterterrorism operation. We've never seen any of those groups conduct an attack like this, and an attack at this level suggests that there was a high amount of information and intelligence that this group had been given, the hit group had been given, for them to be able to conduct this attack and kill these 3 officers working within this specific unit. And for that reason, we do not believe that the Ingushetyan Liberation Army or ISIS-K could have been responsible for this attack inside of southern Russia. It is most likely that Ramzan Kadyrov and the Autonomous Republic or Semi-Autonomous Republic of Chechnya was most likely the one behind the attack, as Ramzan Kadyrov would most likely be privy at this moment to very sensitive government information about where FSB officials are, at least in the surrounding local area. And with that information in mind, he could coordinate, plot, and conduct these attacks against Russian FSB officials so that way he can try and get the upper hand advantage if this was to start to go into an open conflict with the Russian government. And for that reason, I'm going to have to be with a large majority of people who did say that Ramzan Kadyrov conducted this attack. If this smelled any less of ham and cheddar, I would say that it was probably another group. But this thing has been smeared with the absolute essence of ham and cheddar. There's no way that this couldn't be Ramzan Kadyrov, and I would have to say that Akhmat was most likely the one that was responsible for this attack and conducted it without a doubt. And so with that,
Or you think he went in instead of a hit, Don? Do you think this was random gentlemen, or was it some specified people, Don? He said, I've had enough of these 3 guys, Bliat, I'm gonna go get them.
He sat there, Don, and he said to Don, I want bitches grilled, Don. And they said, who's going to get grilled, Don? And he said, the ham and cheddar. And they said, no, like the people. And he went, oh, yeah, right. Just pick 3
I bet none of this would have happened. I bet none of this would have happened at all if, the Cybertruck hadn't been turned off, because that's what really sent Ramzan over the edge was when they cut off the Cybertruck. That's when he just snapped. Like, he lost it and he went haywire.
dude, he did him wrong. He did them so wrong. Man, they bought and somehow smuggled in like 6 Cybertrucks into Chechnya, and every single one of them now has been shut off. I just want y'all to know that, because from what we understand, from what we're hearing now, all of those Cybertrucks didn't legally get imported into Russia. They were purchased in a foreign country, in a third-party country, and then they were smuggled by a shell company from that country and then into Russia, so that way they could circumvent the sanctions. Because actually not SpaceX, Tesla does not sell their vehicles directly into Russia. So if you ever see a Tesla inside of Russia, that is circumventing sanctions of some kind. And once it was publicized,
Well, does it make sense though? Does it make sense though? Like, for example, like I don't think Kadyrov should have his hands on any trucks for that matter. But at the same time though, how does it make sense that someone got a hold of a truck and somehow the company's going to turn it off from a distance? I'm like, I don't know about that. It seems a little bit strange. Like, obviously Kadyrov's a dictator. He shouldn't have his hands on the Cybertruck, but also at the same time, that's a little bit concerning that someone can shut off a truck remotely like that when they don't like the owner.
yeah, I was thinking that as well. I was like, dang, I guess if you just buy a Cybertruck here in America and for some reason someone doesn't like you at Tesla, they can just shut off your truck. I was like, that seems a little, like, at least on an American,
odd.
On an American perspective, it seems like, are you really buying the truck, or are you just buying the right to drive that truck until they unilaterally decide you can't drive it anymore? I was like, that's a little bit of an interesting question there. But beyond that, I think it's perfectly fine in this scenario because obviously they circumvented American sanctions in getting these trucks into Chechnya. But doing this in other places, I would not be a big fan of that, I'll be honest. But also, they're pretty ugly trucks. Like, I don't know if y'all have seen them, because someone actually asked in the chat, what is a Cybertruck? And I guess that you have not heard of the massive kind of like success/flop that the Cybertruck has been, because this thing is loved by some, very few actually, and hated by almost everyone. It's one of the ugliest trucks out there in my opinion. Like, I think it actually is the ugliest truck. I've heard loads of issues about it. It's not as durable or as good as it was originally put out to be. There's a load of issues with the actual chassis that it's built onto. The front steering column is kind of like a fly-by-wire kind of thing. The steering wheel is not actually connected to the steering gear by a column. It's actually a fly-by-wire kind of a system. So it's an electronic input, which a lot of people have been really thrown off by, and me personally, I'm also thrown off by it as well, because that just doesn't sound like a smart idea, especially considering that this thing has apparently had a decent amount of technical issues. People have stress tested this thing, and it just does not stand up like other conventional trucks do to the normal kind of things, or even extreme kind of things that a normal pickup truck could actually survive through. For this reason, I'm just
I think it's going to go down as like a DeLorean or something like that. You know, the like DeLorean thing is really iconic. Like everybody knows what DeLorean looks like. They probably couldn't tell you much about the technical aspects of it. They can say like that's the DeLorean, and we do know that it wasn't the most reliable thing in the world. And I think this is what this is going to go down as well. The Cybertruck is something everyone will recognize, but very few people will think, that was a good truck. It was just something unique.
Yeah, and also I actually just saw that Blood Rain said, I own a Cybertruck. What is it like? Like, what is it actually like to own one of these things? Because I've actually not really heard a lot of good things about them from people who even own them. It's always bad things about them. Maybe you like yours. Maybe it's a good truck. Maybe we're just getting bad press, and that's kind of what's getting pushed out there. But I just personally am not really a big fan of the aesthetic of the thing. It just doesn't look that good. I'm not going to lie. I'm actually going to be honest with y'all. I think what the Chechens did to their Cybertrucks actually was an improvement. You know, like wrapping it in the green and everything. Because in the stainless color, it just doesn't look good. Like, it just looks wrong for some reason.
Yeah, it looks a little bit strange. I'm not gonna lie though; it's not totally ugly. It's a little bit of a different design, I guess you could say. It's not really my like thing. It's not what I really like, but it's unique in its own right. But I bet it's got like some really terrible aerodynamics. But just looking at the thing, it doesn't look very aerodynamic at all to me. But I'm no expert, but it doesn't look like that.
Man, I don't know, man. I just don't think I could ever really get behind this thing. And also, y'all, I just got to say this, like, is my opinion on electric cars. Like, electric cars are not bad. I'm not, like, inherently biased in support of internal combustion engines or electric vehicles at all. I think either one's fine, and if you like an electric car, there's a lot of benefits to them. There's also some downsides, and if you like internal combustion engines, there's, of course, a lot of benefits and some downsides. But at the same time, I don't understand what it is with people in the present day designing electric cars and then going, we have to make them all look like buses. Like, you know, like the electric Mustang, Matthew? Like, let me go find that thing.
Oh yeah, the Mach-E. You're
Oh
talking about
my
the electric,
God.
like hatchback-looking
Yeah.
Mustang.
Yeah, like,
That's not that bad looking. Like this honestly looks better than the Cybertruck, in my opinion.
but I'm going to say this, though. Why is it a hatchback? That's not a Mustang. Like, a Mustang isn't a hatchback. If you wanted something like this, you could go get like a Toyota or a Mazda or something. This looks like one of those. And it's like, it just doesn't, like, all electronic cars, if they're not a Cybertruck, they all almost have the same shape. I mean, this almost looks like a Tesla Model Y to me. And let me go see if I can find that really quickly. Yeah, I mean, it really does. Like, when you look at these, and let me go show this. Let me find a good picture of it at least so that way I can show it. Yeah, you know what? This isn't like the same color red. It almost looks the same, man. Like you're like literally just buying the emblem on the front of the car at that point.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I have nothing really against Mustangs or anything like that, but I don't think the Mustang emblem is something that people are just dying to get, like on a vehicle. Like, if I wouldn't care if this vehicle had a Mustang emblem on it or a Toyota emblem, I would not care 2 bits because it's just an electric EV. So it's like, do people really buy it for the Mustang emblem?
I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I mean, they all look the same though. And my thing is, this is what I'm actually pushing for. If you're going to design and make an electric vehicle, why not make it look cool? Because with an electric car, pretty much everything that runs the car is all straddled right at the bottom of the car in the chassis, like the batteries, the motors, all that stuff. It's pretty much flush on the floor. So literally the entire body, you can design it to be whatever you want it to be. There's no limit to that. So why make them all this like bubbly hatchback looking design when you could go and just make them look like anything you wanted? You could make a retro Mustang design. Like, Matthew, tell me what would be like the most iconic retro style of the Mustang.
The iconic retro Mustang? Let's see. I'm honestly, my brain's so tired right now, I really can't think of it. I'm getting mixed up between multiple different models. Was the Mustang the one that had the split rear window, like the 2 windows on the back? Was that the Mustang?
This one?
No, I think I'm thinking about the Corvette. I'm getting mixed up with the Corvette. I'm not really sure though. Like this could qualify. I'm not a huge expert on the Mustang. I'll be perfectly honest.
I'm not a big expert either, and I'm having a hard time making this argument because I'm like, I can't pull up the exact ones. But here's what I'm saying, folks. Look at this 1970 Mustang. We're just going to take this as an example here. Literally fill in any body shape that you would want. But with this, with it being an electric car, everything's in the chassis of the car. So you can design a body just like this one and sell a retro electronic Mustang for anyone that would want one, and it would work. Like you could put in modern safety features and everything else that you can and make this thing actually happen. I don't know why people don't do that, because I feel like that would honestly be a big seller to people. It's like, oh, it's electric, and that's the thing, whether you like it or not. But it also looks like the body shape that people really like. And then when they think of it, they're like, oh, that's so cool. That's really neat. You could do that with literally any of them. And I don't know why they don't. They always make them look the same, like a Tesla Model Y. And it just drives me crazy because it's like, I like variety and I like interesting designs. And nowadays, I feel like all car designs are very uninspired and very copy-paste from company to company. They all look the same. And I just really wish that there was a lot of variety out there, not only in paint colors, because all of y'all know that like literally the only colors on cars nowadays are like white, gray, or black, because if you get any other color, most of them depreciate like hell. Why in the world is that a thing? They shouldn't be depreciating. I mean, a red car still looks as good as a white or a gray or a black car, so just get a red car. And not only that, have cool body designs. I don't know why they don't do that. It just really annoys me, but that's my little rant on that. Beyond that, though, it still is interesting to hear that the Cybertrucks were shut off. And I would have to say that in this one specific instance, it's all right. I think that's perfectly fine. But anyways, moving on from that, and out of that bit of news, it's now time for us to move on up to Voronezh, because things are getting even worse in Russia. I mean, way worse. Like, if I had to describe how bad worse is getting, it's getting horrendously bad. From what we have been told, today the entire oblast of Voronezh was put on a drone alert. This is what came out on Telegram. Attention, dear Voronezh residents, a danger of UAV attack has been declared in the region. Please remain calm. Air defense forces are at the ready. Stay tuned for further notifications.
Oh, thank God for that, man. Oh, thank God. We can
yeah.
trust the Russian air defense forces. They're always going to make sure that everyone's safe on the ground. Like, they never miss.
Man, you got Sergey out there with the AK. He's got it down, man. He's got the whole airspace locked down. He's running around the Lada at 100 miles an hour looking for drones. But still, they said, stay tuned for further notifications from the regional government or the Russian Emergencies Ministry. We've been told that this is one of the first times that the Voronezh Oblast has even gotten a blast, if you want to call it that, for a drone warning. And this is something that is starting to lead people to believe that Russian air defense is getting pretty much watered down to the point of non-existence. We aren't really seeing any Russian air defense present anywhere within Russia at this point, and the very little that we see is mostly localized near the front lines in Ukraine or somewhere inside of Crimea, and also somewhere around the Rostov-on-Don area and also Krasnodar as well. It does not really seem like there's a lot of air defense left to be able to spread around, and a lot of people are starting to notice this, and are starting to talk about how bad off the Russians really are, at least on the technological and resource side of things. But even still, a lot of people have been talking about this is really pushing the boundaries. I mean, the Ukrainians are attacking anything they want to at this point, really not being stopped at all. And the Russians still aren't really doing anything in response. It's really shocking to a lot of people. It's honestly shocking to us because we would believe at some point a red line would be crossed with the Russian government. And a lot of people are starting to say a little bit different. We've actually heard probably one of the most wildest takes, in my opinion, put out by some analysts today, but it seems that that might actually be on the point. And I believe these analysts were in the Economist's publication today, if I remember correctly, but they said that Putin's only red line is direct NATO intervention inside of Ukraine. And that is a wild statement, because throughout the entirety of the war, we have been told that there are a million red lines. If a F-16 shows up in Ukraine, that's crossing a red line. If sanctions are put on Russia, that's crossing a red line. If merchant ships enter Ukrainian ports and load up with grain, that's crossing a red line. If the Ukrainians strike into Russia, that's crossing a red line. If the Ukrainians continue to fight into the Kursk Oblast, that's crossing a red line. We have heard that literally everything has been a red line. And now we are seeing that none of those things were red lines, and now it seems that other analysts outside of this channel are starting to say that there's only one red line, and that's NATO getting involved in Ukraine. That means the French, that means the British, the Polish, the United States, anyone who would get involved that is in NATO, that would actually tip the scale, and that would be crossing the red line, according to these analysts. And a lot of people are wondering, is that actually believable? And it seems as though everyone is split on this topic. We have everyone saying every different thing under the sun. Yes, it's possible. No, it's not possible. There's other red lines. This is the only red line. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking? Is this the red line, or are there other red lines that could be crossed?
All right. So everyone keep in mind, first off, that these are the same analysts that said that the war was only going to last for 3 days and then Russia would steamroll the entirety of Ukraine. So take it with a grain of salt, because these are basically the same people saying this, but they are claiming that Putin's only red line is direct NATO intervention inside of Ukraine. And the big question is, do you believe their analysis? So 43% said no, Putin has other red lines before we get to that very extreme red line right there. And 41% said yes, that is Putin's only red line. And then 5% said, I really need more info on Putin first before I can make a decision. And I have to say, if you're on this channel and you've been covering the war for a very long time, you've been watching it, you will know pretty much the way Putin is thinking about the frontline situation. And in my opinion, I would say that is probably the most likely red line that Putin has. But we've seen time and time again that Putin threatens the nuclear response for pretty much everything. Whenever there's something he doesn't like, for example, F-16s or whatever it is, he'll say, we're going to launch nuclear weapons at the West if they send those in. And so far, he's been called on his bluff every single time, and he's been proven wrong. So I would say that direct NATO intervention, for example, if France were to send troops into Ukraine to fight Russia directly, that would probably be the most likely red line. But even at that, I do still have some doubts that would actually cause Russia to actually respond in a severe way, because ultimately, what is Russia left with? They're left with launching a nuclear weapon at the West, which would start a nuclear holocaust between the two major powers in the world. So I'm not really sure if you'd go that far even with direct NATO intervention. But overall, I am with the 40%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, I'm going to have to largely be with the 40%. This may actually be Putin's only red line, because we have seen that there are no red lines. I mean, like, every single time there hasn't been one. Let me think of one. I brought up a couple a second ago, and let me try and think of one again. Like when Russia said Ukraine invading Kursk is crossing a red line. What a red line, and what was the response? We haven't seen that actually crossed any red line and that there was any kind of an inevitable response. So once again, that was nothing more than hot air. That was a complete fabrication, and there was not a red line that was actually crossed in that instance. We just keep seeing this over and over and over. It's endless with this sort of a thing. We never see a red line actually get crossed. Remember, Matthew, when they said that if F-16s flew across the Polish-Ukrainian border into Ukraine for the Ukrainians to use, that was going to cross a red line, and NATO and Russia were going to go to war, and then that never happened? Like, do you remember that one?
Yeah. I remember that. He said if the F-16s showed up, the F-16s are capable of carrying nuclear weapons to launch at Russia, and that would be viewed as a nuclear threat. And he said we would go to war over that. The F-16s are currently in Ukraine right now, and where is the war with NATO? It's not here, and it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and exactly. And it's just time and time again. Those are just two examples. We could keep bringing up examples until the end of the show, but those are two examples where they put out red lines that were extreme. We crossed them and they did nothing. And I think that's going to be the case the entire time. I think that if we could do anything, we could approve the Ukrainians striking Moscow with a Patriot, well, not a Patriot, with an ATACMS missile right now, and that missile could hit Moscow, and we probably would see that that would not cross a red line. I truly do think that that is where we're at this moment. I think the only thing that Putin is really concerned about is that the Russian Federation will have to eventually end up fighting NATO, and that's what they really want to avoid. They already know, much like we know, and this is a fact of life, everyone can see this, that NATO would curb stomp the Russians. The Russians can hardly even fight Ukraine, and it's very hard for them to do that. They currently have an entire combined arms offensive, like they would be conducting against a Western country right now, to try and take one Ukrainian town that has about 40,000 people living in it, and they have been stopped outside of this town for about 6 to 8 months and have not been able to make hardly even a mile towards this city. I want to remind y'all what they're fighting. They are fighting a country that at the end of the Soviet Union and the beginning of the present day was so poor and so broke that they had to give up all of their nuclear weapons just because largely they honestly could not even maintain them. And so it was much more smart for them to give them up. This country has been, realistically, at least over the past 30 years, one of the most corrupt countries in Eastern Europe. Of course, that's been changing with Petro Poroshenko and Volodymyr Zelensky. There's been major reforms and anti-corruption campaigns inside of Ukraine, but historically, Ukraine has been a fairly corrupt nation. This is the most handicapped country in all of Europe. To be entirely honest with y'all, we were to talk about this on a real level, and they have only been getting on their game for about the past 10 years, since 2014, when the Donbass got annexed along with Crimea. And over those short 10 years, they have somehow been able to bring themselves up from literally nothing nearly to a country that can actually stand its own for the large part against Russia. Now, I want to put that into perspective. That doesn't mean that the Ukrainians have come a long way up. That means that they came a little ways up, and the Russians are so dog water quality, just getting that far up made it to where they could stand their own against Russia. Now, if you think about that, really think about that. If the Ukraine, over just 8 years really before this war began, could get in a well enough condition that they can give Russia a run for their money, how would Russia do against a country just like Poland, that has had about 30 years to get out of the Soviet Eastern Bloc kind of a corrupt mindset and get into a westernized stance? Poland would curb stomp Russia single-handedly. Much worse, think about if the entirety of NATO went to war with Russia. They would be destroyed. Literally, it would be like the damn Gulf War. They would get destroyed in the air and then on the ground, and then they would get steamrolled by the advance of Western armies just moving on their way towards any of the major cities and capturing them. That's how that would go.
Honestly, Enforcer, I just don't think that, for example, if NATO in its entirety went up against Russia, I just don't ever think it would be a situation where it would only be Russia that we're fighting. It would be other powers as well. For example, Iran, North Korea, and maybe even China jumping in as well, because I just don't see a world where we could take on Russia as NATO, because NATO would curb stomp Russia, without a doubt. Putin himself has even said that in an interview before the Ukraine war started. He said that unless they have their nuclear weapons ready to fire at NATO, NATO would absolutely demolish Russia and take the whole thing over pretty quickly. And that's not an understatement. We actually would, because NATO is a very powerful alliance. But I think we'd be fighting a lot of other countries at the same time if that were to happen.
Maybe so, but honestly, I don't think the Chinese would get involved. I'm thinking that they probably wouldn't, because they're already in an economically precarious position, and they don't necessarily have to come and help Russia to continue on their goal of being a prosperous socialist society by 2049. So they could probably just sit it out and just watch everyone else get beat to death, and then just wait for the war to end. Because if the United States came forward when this war began and told China, we're not going to be asking them anything crazy, we're not going to be overthrowing the Russian government and installing a pro-Western government there, we're literally just going to be enforcing a status quo antebellum peace treaty, and that's it. Meaning that Ukraine would get all of its land back, the Russians would stop the war in Ukraine, and also the war would be stopped with NATO, and we really wouldn't gain anything out of it, but we really wouldn't lose anything either. And if we laid out those terms to the Chinese would go, hell, there's not even a stake in this war for me to be fighting for at all, so I'll just sit it out and watch the Russians get beat. And then at the end of the war, I'll just come in and truly make them the resource colony that China needs. That's what China would probably do. So maybe North Korea and Iran would get involved, but then you also have to think about the kind of risk they're putting themselves into, because much like Russia, while all of them are nuclear, and Iran isn't nuclear armed yet, but while North Korea and Russia are nuclear armed, they both understand and realize that going up against a fully trained and competent Western force made up of contract soldiers and not conscripts that are well equipped and well funded would be a disaster for any of these countries. It has been proven through history, just in the recent decades, that that will always be true. And so I think for that reason, North Korea would probably dip, and Iran would certainly dip, because, Matthew, we were already seeing that Khamenei is running from bunker to bunker just because of the Israelis. Imagine if you knew the entire U.S. Navy had every single F-18 and F-35 off the carriers and looking for him. I mean, that man would literally be burrowing through the ground like a mole to try and hide from the airstrikes. I don't think they would get involved, because they would be too scared that everyone in the government would get killed in 30 minutes. So I think it really would be just the Russians alone, maybe. But even still, the Russians know that this would truly be the red line. They would have to start doing some very drastic actions like tactical nuclear launches and then intercontinental ballistic launches to try and stabilize the situation or at least ensure mutually assured destruction. But beyond that, that would be my take on this. I think that really is the only red line, is that NATO intervention is a thing that Russia just cannot accept, because it would be the doom of Russia at that point if we did get involved. So they may as well go all in at that point instead of just sitting back and getting beat to death by NATO inside of Ukraine. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, because I'm going to stay pretty true to that conviction, because Ukraine, and I want to remind you all again, I said this before, I'll say this a second time, Ukraine is not a country that is a military powerhouse. I want to put that out there, because a lot of people, I will say this, and I say this in the most respectful way. I don't mean this like disrespect anyone who would think this, but this is how I think of it. A lot of people have kind of gotten into this delusion that Ukraine is some sort of an amazing like super warrior state that is just the best at fighting wars. I want to make sure to remind y'all that wars are fought a lot like how professional football in America is played, or how soccer matches are played around the world. There are different leagues, and Ukraine and Russia are in like the C tier or D tier league at this moment. America is in the A tier league, pretty much on it. Well, really the S tier league, pretty much on its own. Most other Western countries are in the A tier league. China is probably somewhere in between the B and the A tier league currently, and then every other country is in the C, D, or F tier from that point forward. So when you look at Ukraine fighting Russia, I want to make sure that y'all are reminded of the kind of scale or the kind of scope here as to how competent they are. They are very competent against an incompetent enemy like Russia. But if either of them ended up ever going up against another opponent that was in the Western world, you would see that there was a lot of discrepancies or a lot of shortcomings that they will basically inherently have, just because that's the case. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And I see someone saying, Ari, soccer? I had to bring up a good example to try and explain that, because there are leagues of countries, much like there are leagues in any kind of a sport, in a professional sporting group. And you largely see a lot of countries will kind of fall into that metric of a sort, where they will be good on a peer-on-peer fight, but they will not be good if they're ever outdone by someone else. And America will obviously outdo anyone in a conventional war. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And also, and Star Freaky said, and they're winning. They're still winning. Yeah, and that's the crazy thing about it, is that over 8 years, they got in a good enough condition to go up against Russia and largely win in a defensive war. That's the craziest thing about it. But anyways, with that, before we move on into the rest of our news, because we still have a large amount of news coming out of Yeysk, out of our location unknowns, out of the Kursk Oblast, and also out of the rest of the front line, we have some questions that we want to get to. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first Super Chat segment of the night, we have a very generous $100 donation from none other than Patrol. And thank you very much, Patrol, for the largest Super Chat of the night, a $100 donation. We appreciate that very much, and that is a humongous help to help keep the channel running, and we appreciate it. And Patrol says, very simply, LSA.
And LSA, and thank you so much for that massive support, Patrol. That is absolutely huge. And I got to thank you so much for being a big part of the LSA and really enjoying this a lot and supporting it and helping it to keep on running. We do not make it to where anyone has to be a member of the LSA and supported to be one. You can be a member of the LSA just because you want to be. And I've got to say that it's amazing that so many people really do love and enjoy the Lee Spring Army so much that they go out of their way to support this channel and help it to keep on running, although we never require that of anyone. It is absolutely amazing, and we're incredibly thankful and appreciative that you threw in that support and you're helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. We wouldn't have been able to be here this entire time, and we wouldn't be able to be here as we're counting down the days to the 1,000th day of war. It's pretty crazy to think that we've been here for this long and that so many folks like you have supported us and helped us out along the way, and that is absolutely a massive way to support and help out this channel as we continue to count down the days to the 1,000th day of war. And so a massive thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Purple Gerbil, who puts in a $50 donation as well, and a huge shout out to the Purple Gerbil for that very generous support. And Purple Gerbil is, of course, a channel legend, and we appreciate you very much. And he says, do you think the Ukrainians will try to reclaim territory before winter comes?
I don't think that they will, actually, because from what we can tell, the Russians have been trying to conduct offensives all year. They've literally thrown everything out of the window. These units are exhausted. They're unmotivated. Their morale is low. Their organization is low. Everything is pretty bad off for the Russians, but they still keep pushing the units into the offensives regardless of that, endlessly, in the area around the Corona Forest, in Pokrovsk, even all the way up in the area around Vovchansk. Crazily enough, while even being pushed back sometimes, they're still trying to overall conduct an offensive. And that's leading me to believe that the Ukrainians will probably not be able to stabilize the situation and turn it around to where they can conduct an offensive before winter, at least at this moment. It appears that the Ukrainians will probably be stuck on the defensive through the remainder of this year and just hold the ground they have and let the Russians grind themselves down against pretty strong Ukrainian defensive positions. That's at least what it looks like right now, and things can change pretty quickly on the battlefield. Like, for example, at Severodonetsk and Lysychansk way back in the day in the summer of 2022, we saw that things changed very rapidly because the Russians were quite literally exhausted, at least in combat efficiency, once the battle had ended, and that largely gave the Ukrainians the initiative right after that to dedicate a large amount of their manpower and resources towards the area of Balaklia, right outside of Kharkiv, and to conduct the Balaklia counteroffensive at the later end of that year and reclaim a load of ground. Actually, one of the biggest reclamations of ground that we've ever seen in the war so far. So while they could do something like that, hypothetically, I'm just thinking that it probably will not happen this year. Maybe next year during the summer months, possibly. They probably wouldn't do it during the spring because, once again, that'll be Rasputitsa season, and Rasputitsa season is hell on earth to even just survive in. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my analysis. And of course, take it with a grain of salt. I could be wrong, Purple Gerbil, and I never want anyone to think that like my word is gospel and it's 100% correct, and it can never be wrong, because it can be wrong, and sometimes our analysis has ended up being incorrect, but that's what I would think at the moment. And so with that, a huge thanks to you once again, Purple Gerbil. Thank you, by the way, for being an old guard as well and supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running, because if it was not for folks like you and the incredibly nice people who are throwing in super chats right now, like Chelsea Huffman and Davo LBC, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And also, I got to give a quick thanks to everyone before we move on to our last question of this segment for all of the support that's been coming in. We are so appreciative and thankful for all of y'all enjoying this channel and supporting it. We always say this, and I always want to make this very clear. Y'all never have to support the channel if y'all do not have the ability to, or if y'all don't simply want to. This channel is entirely free to watch, and we always want to keep it that way. You should be able to get news ad-free and sponsor-free, and there should not always be a profit motive underlying every single word that comes out in a news publication, and that's what we try and keep up the best we can. We don't make a cent, we don't make a dime running these streams, and once again, largely because a lot of people don't put their money where their mouth is when they say that kind of a thing, I'll make sure to prove that to y'all right here and right now by showing you all of our live streams and showing that the monetization is off, and it also doesn't have the little check mark saying that there's a paid sponsor on them, because there are none. These streams run absolutely free. We don't make $1 running these things beyond viewers going out of their way to support it. Y'all are absolutely incredible folks. We don't ask y'all to support the channel. Nevertheless, y'all enjoy it so much, y'all help us to be able to keep the lights on and pay our bills. And I always want to make sure that every single one of y'all knows, whether it's $1, whether it's hundreds of dollars that's being thrown in a single super chat, that we are incredibly appreciative of each and every single one of y'all and the efforts that y'all go through in supporting this channel by hitting the like button, saying kind words in the live chat, and even supporting the channel directly through a super chat to make this thing possible. That we are always greatly appreciative, and we notice every single bit of support, and we are wildly appreciative, humbled, and grateful for it as well. And so a huge thanks to y'all all once again. And with that, we're going to be taking our last question in this live chat segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news that we have tonight.
All right. So with that, also by the way, I've just also mentioned this as well. For all the people donating tonight, you'll be helping to basically contribute to the fiber fund because we're going to definitely be getting that fiber installed very soon because the 5G is honestly junk. Like I keep hearing the enforcer breaking up every like 5 seconds, and that is not going to work. So we'll be getting that fixed within probably like a week or so once we can get that installed. So thank you all once again for supporting the channel and supporting the fiber fund. But this is going to go to Chris's mom, who puts in a $50
No way.
donation, and it's actually Chris's mom who's in the live chat right now. And of course, I think it's a parody account. If it's the real deal, I am surprised here. But thank you very much for that $50 donation. We appreciate it very much. And they said you guys are awesome, and I enjoy watching all the time. And no questions from me. And take one from the chat.
And I gotta say, we are honored by the presence of Chris's mom. I can't believe this, Matthew. It's actually
Yes.
happened. Like, I cannot believe this, man. It's been years, man, that we've been talking about for being the butt of jokes in this channel for at least a year and a half at this point. I also have to thank you for some... Oh, wait a minute. We flatlined right there. Oh, Matthew, are you there?
See, it happened again, man.
It's
Yeah, I'm here now, but it went dead for a second.
Man, it's happening again. We'll wait for this one to clear up because this one was so bad. YouTube actually said that the stream died, like it said no data. I'm sorry about that, everyone. Once again, we're working on that, but we can only work on things so quickly because we can't force an internet company to like dig wires tomorrow, or anything like that. We have to kind of take time with that. So very sorry about the lag, everyone, once again. But moving on from that. I cannot believe, man, that Chris's mom is here right now. This is absolutely crazy. And I gotta thank you for being the butt of jokes, pun intended, and also enjoying watching this all the time because we put a lot of work into this thing. And I've got to thank everyone who always enjoys it because we always love to know that people are actually enjoying what we do. We put a lot of work, we put a lot of effort into this thing, and it really has been showing lately because after our little brief hiatus that wasn't planned, and I want to make sure that y'all know that on that one, with our vacation where we were gone for several days, that one was entirely planned. It was planned about a month and a half in advance. With what happened recently, that was literally not planned at all. That was a kind of like an immediate ad hoc kind of a thing where we had to do things to stabilize situations and things like that. But beyond that, one thing I will say is that we are always entirely appreciative of each and every one of y'all enjoying our work because we always dedicate ourselves to doing this pretty much every single waking hour of every single waking day so that we all can all get the news. I find that to be a high honor. It's the highest honor that I've ever been given. And crazily enough, this channel has been blowing up after we came back from that brief hiatus I was talking about a little while ago. We have gotten up to 283,500 subscribers at this point. We are getting really close. We're only 15,000 subscribers away from 300,000 subs, which is crazy. It means that this channel, over the course of this year alone, has ended up getting a collective 125,000 new subscribers, practically doubling in size just over the course of this calendar year alone. And I got to tell y'all, I don't know what is bringing so many new people here to that kind of a degree, to that kind of a number, but we are wildly thankful and incredibly appreciative to have each and every single one of y'all here. And I got to thank you so much once again, Chris's mom, for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running, because folks like you are helping this channel to keep alive and helping us to keep the phrase going that the Lee Spring Army will never die. And long live the LSA. And Matthew, what do we got for a live chat?
All right, so the live chat question is going to go to John B. Rempel. And he says, is it okay to have North Koreans, but Ukraine can't get help from France?
It's an interesting question. It actually is. Now, kind of technically sort of yes, because if North Korea is going to get involved, the thing is that they're a nuclear armed power, so there's really not a lot we can do to them unless we want someone to get nuked, like by them. So it's kind of okay for them to join. Now, France could join the war in Ukraine, and they are also a nuclear power, which practically makes them untouchable by most senses, but at the same time, there's a lot of diplomacy at play with them really getting directly involved like that. So it's unfair, but it's unfair in a way that doesn't really matter that much. Because if France got involved, Russia's dying tonight. If North Korea gets involved, things aren't really changing because you got a military that's largely stuck in the 50s coming to help out the Russians, and that's not really going to be changing much for anyone. It's like bringing armed citizenry out to the battlefield and telling them to slug it out with the Ukrainians. It just won't mean anything. So it's not really fair if you want to think of it that way, but at the same time, it's kind of an unfair thing that doesn't really affect much. So in that sense, it kind of just balances out, and no one really cares to actually react in any kind of a large way. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And I thank you so much once again for support, Chris's mom, and sponsoring a live chat and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And so a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address it incredibly well. And with that, we're now going to be moving on into Ukraine, where we were able to see today that a Gepard ended up conducting an interception against an unspecified drone and an unspecified location. Observe. There's the computer.
It's kind of scary for some reason. It looks like it's like a nuclear reactor.
Oh!
Yeysk.
Dang, okay, well, still pretty impressive. And also, I will agree with you, man. You know what this honestly looks like, man? This looks like, this almost looks like that, movie, what was it? What was it called? It was the one with, Denzel Washington in it, where they were on the submarine.
Was that, Snow White?
No. No. Bro, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs on a nuclear sub? Nah, I'm doubting that one. But still, this was a pretty...
I have no idea, man. I think I know the movie you're talking about, but I don't know the name of it right off the bat.
It's like called Roll Tide or something like that, I think. And now Crimson Tide, that's what it was called. It was called Crimson Tide. Yeah,
Roll
this
Tide.
one. Right here, the 1995 thriller action movie. This one right here with the fully red like movie like title poster thing right there.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I see it now.
This was a good movie, by the way. If y'all want a movie to watch, this was a pretty good one. And also someone said, Red October? No. It's Crimson Tide. Very similar, kind of, sort of, but very different as well. But I really liked this movie. It was an incredibly good one. But anyways, moving on from that and into our next clip near Chcchnya, we also got to see the Ukrainians taking out a Russian's comm tower in this area. We also got to hear the Chernobyl music right there as they slam into the tower, blowing it up, and absolutely destroying the Russians' ability to talk, which largely was destroyed by the copious amounts of vodka that they drank the other day. Oh, and they got another one. And would you look at that, folks? Another one. Oh, and it caught on fire. Man, they grilling down there. They grilling.
Man, they're cooking them up like a Wiener Schnitzel down here. You know what I mean?
Man, I'm telling you what, man, that Wiener. And that's the end of the clip. Wonderful to see those drone attacks occurring in that area and inflicting a decent damage. We also got to see, sadly, a Ukrainian striker burning in Kursk. That is a striker down there on fire. Once again, showing that the Ukrainians are taking some losses in this offensive, but not as high as the Russians would make you believe, because we actually don't have a lot of footage of Ukrainian military vehicles being destroyed in the Kursk Oblast, interestingly enough. We also got to see the 82nd Brigade today slamming the Russians near to Bolshoi Soldatskoy. All right, and we're going to be muting that. But we can see the Ukrainians bringing some bombs with them. And we can see them finding some Russians, and they're about to drone strike them. These hoes must be from Iraq.
Play it safe and calling a drone strike. I think we've seen them going down the road. You know, they're out here on the road. Go ahead and take them out.
You call it collateral. I call it acceptable casualties or something like that. It's like
collateral damage. It's like a war stimulus package. You know what I mean?
that's man. Hey man, they really blew that armored truck up pretty well. That was a real stimulus package right there, and they're about to really stimulate the armored truck here in a second by slamming a bomb right down to the hood. Bam! Right there.
That Russian package was stimulated. It was blown up to smithereens. Wow.
Well, I took the whale carcass and I dropped it on the armored car or something like that. But anyways, moving on from that clip, really nice to see that they were able to knock that thing out. The Kursk Oblast is kind of a bit inactive at the moment. The front lines really aren't changing, and we're also not getting a high amount of reports about what's going on in the Kursk Oblast at all either. But moving on from that and on down into the location unknowns, we were also able to get some pretty interesting clips down here as we got to see a picture of the 47th Brigade today with MS-55 tanks donated from Slovenia. These are heavily upgraded T-55s, and also a Bradley that is also there as well. Pretty cool overall, and I gotta say, I really like to see it. We really love to see it. Moving on from that and into our next picture, we also got to see a heavily upgraded Leopard 1A5, and this thing is so upgraded you can hardly even tell it really was a Leopard at some point.
Yeah, it's been like just absolutely smothered in those contact tiles on the side of it. You can't tell what the silhouette is of this thing.
Yeah, man, it has been absolutely kitted. So I'll show you what the Leopard 1A5 kind of originally looks like right here. And this is what the Ukrainians turned it into. The Contact 1 ERA tiles are like the damn Omnissiah for the Ukrainians. They put these things on everything. Like, man, this is Mike's Red Hot. They put that on everything, man. Like, and they really
Frank's.
do. Yeah, Frank's hot sauce. They put that on
Not
everything.
Mike.
And they really do, man. I mean, they slap this thing on any flat surface there is. I don't know if these will even really work for the Leopard because they have paper-thin armor as is. So maybe it'll protect it against, I don't know, an RPG, but it's not going to be protecting it against anything big, like an ATGM or a APFSDS round. Those will go clean through. But still, pretty wild to see. Pretty wild, like, to see how much they're upgrading these things. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see that apparently we're also starting to get proof here that the Russians are starting to conduct some sort of electronic warfare defense. As we can see that now on their drones, they have some sort of an electronic warfare system that is attempting to disrupt the signal of incoming anti-drone Ukrainian drones and trying to knock them out so that way they can continue on their missions. Pretty interesting to see that, and it's once again showing that electronic warfare is starting to permeate about every single facet of the battlefield, even air-to-air drone operations that are being conducted at the moment. But a lot of people are also talking about NATO, because while we are talking about this little electronic warfare discovery here, if NATO was to go to war with Russia, would they have help from Iran, North Korea, and others? Would the entire world come together that's not in the Western world to try and gank the Western world, or would they absolutely get their ankles broken? And it seems as though a lot of people are saying that they would come together to try and gank the Western world. Some others are saying that the Russians would be on their own to have their ankles broken, and some are saying that only time will tell, because time heals all wounds except for those that are too great. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking as well?
All right. So if NATO were to go to war with Russia, would they have help from Iran, North Korea, and also others? So about 50% said yes, the others would jump in, while 31% said no, Russia would be on its own, and 13% said, only time would tell on this one. So honestly, to me, like I said earlier, I think the others would jump in. Russia would not be left to fend for itself out there because Russia is aligning itself pretty strongly with China, actually, and also much stronger with Iran and also North Korea. Now, I know that North Korea is not exactly a military powerhouse, that is true, but they do have nuclear weapons. And also Iran is also really not a a military powerhouse all the way around, but they also might be developing and finishing up a nuclear weapon as well. So those countries, while they're not very powerful, they do have some weapons of mass destruction, which could be detrimental. Now, the big one would be if China got involved in that. If China stepped in, that would be an entirely different equation for NATO. That would put NATO actually on a pretty level playing field, in my opinion, if China were to jump in with Russia. That would be a much different fight, probably a much harder fight for NATO to actually handle. So I'm actually with the 50%. I think the others would jump in. But Enforcer, what say you?
I think it really depends. Some may jump in, others probably wouldn't. I have a feeling that North Korea probably would not jump in, neither would Iran or China. So I honestly think the only country that would jump in would be Belarus, but they're kind of jumping in just because they have to at that point, because there's going to be no one left if they didn't. So they better go down with the ship instead of, hopping off and letting the rest of it sink and then being stuck on a lifeboat to starve to death. So in my opinion, maybe Belarus would jump in, but I don't think anyone else is really chomping at the bits to die at the hands of the Western world, because we have made it very clear in the past we can destroy all of them even if they all join in at the same time, and so none of them probably are that apt to die, especially people like Khamenei, who are already hiding just from the Israelis. I want to remind you all that the Iranians are scared of just Israel. Now, imagine if the whole U.S. Navy is trying to blow you up. Now, that would be a whole other story. At that point, you are literally dead. There's no way to hide because the Israelis have pretty good abilities, but America's got far better. And on top of that, another country like North Korea, imagine that, man. They don't even really have effective air defense or an air force, so their skies are literally open from moment one. That fat guy is going to get absolutely splattered across the ground. His fat is going to grease the sidewalks, and I don't think that he wants to come to that realization either anytime soon, because it would happen. Like, there's no doubt about that. So
Also another thing as well, that even if NATO were to go to war with Russia, one plan that NATO could implement to make sure that we're still on good footing, for example, if we want to keep Iran and North Korea out of the fight, we could simply have, for example, South Korea keep North Korea occupied, and then we could have Israel keep Iran occupied. So that would take those two countries out of the fight, or at least preoccupy them so much that they really won't be able to get totally involved on defending Russia on their behalf. So that is another option as well. I think that would probably be maybe a likely case scenario that they would start something, or maybe the West would encourage them to distract them, so that way we could fight Russia on their own. And that would basically bring up the point, is China going to get involved at that point? Because nobody's really going to keep China at bay or distracted. The only one that could distract China would be the United States. And at that point, we'd be fighting Russia directly along with the NATO alliance. So I think China is the real wild card here.
I would have to agree. I think that probably would be the case, but even still, I don't think the Chinese would want to get involved because the economic backlash they would permanently face for that would doom China to the economic obscurity that they were familiar with before they joined the World Trade Organization and started to get really heavily involved in trade on the world stage. So I really do think they probably will not. I don't think anyone would get involved. I truly do think that Russia would be on their own, except for Belarus, and that doesn't even really count in my opinion, because Belarus is almost like a puppet state. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. I could be wrong. But moving on from that, and on into the rest of our location unknowns, we also got to see the first AIM-9Xs in Ukraine. Now, these are actually pretty cool. AIM-9Xs are fairly modern. They're still used by the U.S. Air Force, and apparently we are starting to see that the Ukrainians are getting some shipments of these. We're pretty interested by that. We'll be keeping an eye on that and seeing if they're ever used, but that's pretty wild just as a matter of fact. We also got to see this. Observe. Y'all can already tell this is going to be bad.
Oh, man. That is just so funny. He wants to chop his comrades down.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, man. You and me have shot AK-74s. They don't have that much recoil where two of them are literally going to push you down to the ground. This has got to be the... Oh, I know. Okay, so I think the reason why he fell is because he was stanced like an idiot, and he was literally leaning backwards before he even started shooting, so it didn't take much to push him on over. This is a sad guy. This is a joke. But anyways, moving on from that clip and this clown, we're now going to be moving on to our next clip, where we're also going to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours, and boy, howdy, was it good.
Oh my God, man, we have 10 Bobcat skid steers tonight. I tell you what, it's an absolute miracle. Now, of course, like I've said before, the 99 Bobcats have spoiled us a little bit because that was a humongous number that'll probably never be beat, to be perfectly honest, but they're about to cross over 3,400 Bobcats in total. It's a tremendous day, but Enforcer, tell us more.
Man, it was a tremendous day indeed, with 1,140 Russian soldiers wounded and killed in the past 24 hours, along with 35 APCs, 84 supply trucks, 8 main battle tanks, 59 artillery pieces, 49 drones, 4 MLRSs, and 10 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, today was an incredibly good day, and we were happy to see that the Ukrainian forces were able to conduct a successful defensive and continue to inflict really high casualties onto the Russian forces. Moving on from that and over into the Vovchansk area, we also got to see that the Ukrainian police were back out on the job and making sure to arrest any Russian suspects in the area. And you see they just got done with their prayer there. And they're now getting out of the car and immediately giving us a cease and desist in the copyright infringement department. You would think the police would know better. But you can see them now firing into the building as their comrades continue to depart the vehicle and move up towards it.
This is under the police.
This is under the police. Bam, bam. This is under the police. We see them firing an AT weapon, moving on around the corner, and grabbing that other AT weapon. You thought it was over, didn't you, Ruski? Guess what? More AT. Bam! There goes another one, right into the building the Russians are in. Rest in peace.
I have a feeling that these police do not file police reports, Bliat. They don't file reports at all. They are wielding missiles, Bliat. These police are unconventional. Oh, look, here's one right here. He's looking at he's looking at something blow up. He's not happy.
We see him firing another AT weapon. Actually, a grenade launcher right there. And we can now see them laying down a little bit of rifle fire. They're just giving them the works.
These guys just are really not police. They're really just like military.
At this point, they really are, man. They're just they're police in name only. They're pretty much a light infantry force at this point in the war. And it's crazy to see that kind of stuff because the Ukrainian police went from being at the beginning of the war a really, really light infantry force. It was literally like armed citizenry to now they're pretty much as well trained as normal infantry units. Man, I keep on getting an error screen on the YouTube control room that says, sorry, ran out of memory or something like that. And I'm like, how the hell is that happening? Because we're literally doing everything we're normally doing and now it's saying it's running out of memory. I'm blown away by this. I'm shocked even.
Oh, well, also, by the way, when I just like randomly stop talking, I'm not just like doing that for like dramatic effect or something. It's usually because I'm lagging out and I'm just going to stop talking so that way I'm not like interrupting and everything because it's ultimately the interruptions just like ruin the flow of the show. So I'm trying to keep that at bay. So that's why like I'm just randomly like saying bits and pieces and stopping because I'm trying to prevent that.
Man, I respect it. I honestly respect the grind. We also got to see a Ukrainian D-30 working in Vovchansk as well. A Sturmgewehr artillery, and this was in September of this year. So kind of recent, but not like really up to date. But man, look at them go. They're getting in the trucks. They're riding around with the Gats, with the piece. They're loading up that piece. They're about to give the Russians a little piece. Reese's Pieces. Bam! And there we go. And they're getting more Reese's Pieces. Have you ever wanted to have the sweet, savory bliss of Ukrainian HE rounds slamming into your position and knocking your damn teeth out? Well, then you, my friend, are in luck. Introducing the all-new Ukrainian D-30 howitzer, the only kind of howitzer of its kind to sit there and not only give you the boom, but give you the bang at the same time. Like a Bang energy drink. Kinda like Prime, but without the piss flavor. Look at them go.
Have you seen that prank where the people walk around with that Bang energy drink and they're like, hey, bro, you want a bang? And they're like, what? So what'd you say? And they get in like a fist fight or something like that.
Dude, I've seen that happen, but with Prime, and it wasn't a misunderstanding about what they were saying. It's just that they were offended they were being offered Prime. But moving on from that into Svatove.
Understandable.
Yeah, that's understandable, man. If someone came up to me and said, "Hey, you want a Prime?" I think there would be a beating going on in the streets, man. That's an offense. It's like, what do you think? Do you think I'm like desperate for a drink or something? It's like, dude, why would you give me a Prime? It's like cyanide. But anyways, moving on from that, we did get to see a Russian grad getting absolutely schmacked out there. Check this out. And we're going to be muting that. Boom! Right there, dead on the nail. And it's smoking and toasting. It's cooking. Do you smell what the Rock is cooking? Me either, because I don't think the Rock cooks. But we can see here that more rounds are slamming into the trees. Someone's about to be really offended by that. Like, I was just trying to figure out a good joke and a punchline, and someone's about to say, "How dare you? I'm a fan of the Rock, and I'm going to have you know that's disrespectful." And I'm going to be like, whatever, it's a joke. But anyways, we can see them continuing to hit the Russians. The Russians are...
The Ukrainians, they hit the Russians, Bliat. They said, Bliat, you want a bang? And the Russians said, no, I don't. And they said, oh, sorry, but you're going to have to get banged.
Man, they sat there and said, would you like to get banged? And the Russian said, no, diddy. And the Ukraine said, of course, no, diddy. And then just slammed an HE round on top of them. It's like, man, it's like they just couldn't win. Either way, it was going to be a loss. But anyways, we also got to see some Russians getting hit as well by some drones. These guys believed in their electronic warfare systems a little too much. And you see him here just looking at the drone. Oh, Bliat.
Oh, that's very copyrighted right there. That is so copyrighted to the max. That is getting a cease and desist letter without even getting it. You're just it's put into your brain by like telepathy.
Dude, they just felt the wind coming off of the air conditioning beside me and were like, yep, that's a copyright infringement right there.
When I heard that one, I said, the who is that? The who?
Man, dude, I was like, when I heard that, man, my life flashed before my eyes. I was like, we're about to be in serious trouble right there. We're about to be getting some heat on us. But anyways, we also got to see that the Ukrainians are now using automated drones in the Kremenna area. These drones don't require the pilot to fly them to the Russian. They just select the Russian as a target, and the drone does all the work. Look at that. It's like magic. And see, the Russian disappeared. That's the end of the clip. But hey, pretty impressive technological advancements by the Ukrainians. We also got to see a Ukrainian tank commander in the Kursk area. It was a little rainy today, but they were still having a fun time. Oh, man, are you kidding me? They're going to let the crank... They're going to let that sweet crank get rained on, man. That is sad, and it's like...
Oh, you can't handle some rain?
It can handle rain, but it's going to start rusting if they don't clean it. And this thing's like mint, man. Like, it's a mint condition crank. I hate to see that, man. That's sad.
Man, my best AR is going to be dragged through mud, run over by trucks, and absolutely demolished and still be perfectly fine and not rust.
I've never seen you, Matthew, put your ARs in anything but an air-conditioned room. Like I'm not going to lie.
Oh, I
man.
watched somebody else do it. I watched somebody else do it. It was like one of those Arsenal guys off of YouTube that did it, and he did everything to it, put in the mud, the water, everything. It still fired, and it was perfectly good.
Man, well, maybe they can do it, but I'm not putting my crank in that kind of state. Like, no.
It's a little bit foggy out here or something, like foggy London.
Oh, look, there's another Ukrainian tank out there. And that's the end of that clip, but still showing y'all a little bit of what the day looked like in the Seversk area. Meanwhile, a little bit further south, we also get to see that near to Chasiv Yar, a Russian BTR-82 got hit by a javelin as the copyright hits us again. There's our BTR-82 down there. Look at him go. There goes my hero, and there my hero is now gone. Very sad. Wow. Very sad. But still, a very unfortunate case for those Russians, but a great one for the Ukrainians still, of course, as usual. We also got to see that the Ukrainian sappers in Turets today actually ran up to a building and blew it up. You want to see that happen, like, while it's happening? When you see them advancing to the building, laying down heavy fire as they go, climbing through the rubble, bringing up the bomb, and we see the bomb right there, throwing the bomb. Here in a second, you'll see it. See them firing into the windows, putting the bomb down, setting the fuse, putting down another one, and running away. And here in a second, you're about to see it. It's about to happen. Nothing. But it did blow up. The building did blow up. It's just that we didn't get to see it, unfortunately. But still, a really cool clip of some combat engineers in action, taking out a building, demolishing it to the ground. What better could you ask for? You couldn't. And so moving on from that and down into the Yeysk area, we also get to see an aftermath of the Ukrainian attack down here. Here's the original picture of the facility. Here's what it looks like now. And we can see that a lot of it's destroyed. Rejoice! Rejoice! It's gone. And they won't be able to use that anymore, will they? But moving on from that and on over into the Kherson area, we also got to see a pretty unfortunate thing today. I'm not going to be showing the entire clip, and we actually can at all, but the Russians are now clearly targeting and attacking Ukrainian citizens living within Kherson city as they are once again extending their campaign of terror onto the Ukrainian citizenry for about the 961st day in a row. But with that, we're now going to be moving on out of Kherson and on up into Kyiv, where we're going to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 961 of the war. And without further ado, if it loads, here we go. And without further
Hey, look, he's in the Ukrainian presidential plan. It's pretty cool.
It actually does, doesn't it? It is pretty neat because you can see Ukraine on the back of that headrest. Pretty cool right there. But without further ado, here is the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky on day 961 of the war. And so, speech!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Важливий тиждень зустрічі з нашими друзями в Європі, найбільші оборонні донори, і ще стратегічний регіон Балкан та загалом Південно-Східної Європи. Сьогодні Берлін перемовини з канцлером Шольцем. Щойно зустріч з президентом Штайнмаєром, буде новий оборонний пакет для України від Німеччини. Я дякую особливо за допомогу системами ППО. В цьому Німеччина безумовний лідер підтримки. Я дякую за ще одну IRIS-T. Ми обговорили з канцлером, якою буде підтримка в цьому році і в наступному. Для нас дуже важливо, щоб обсяг допомоги від Німеччини залишався сталим. І це буде сигналом, що і шлях до миру, попри все, буде впевнений. Обговорили, як більше консолідувати світ для наближення миру. Поінформував президента Штайнмаєра про нашу роботу з партнерами і те, як ми можемо додати сили позиціям України, щоб вся Європа від цього виграла. Сьогодні ж вранці у Ватикані провів зустріч з папою Римським Франциском і держсекретарем кардиналом Пароліном. Дуже чутливе питання для України, для багатьох сімей в Україні – звільнення з російського полону наших людей. Воїни і цивільні, діти і дорослі, тисячі українців і українок. І вчора стало відомо про загибель в російському полоні української журналістки Вікторії Рощиної. Мої співчуття рідним. Але вона була у списках на обмін. І дуже важко вести цю роботу, підштовхувати обміни. І саме тому потребуємо спеціальної допомоги, зокрема, зусиль Ватикану. І ми домовилися, що Україна передасть список журналістів, які зараз в полоні в Росії. І ми обговорили детально повернення цивільних, повернення депортованих дітей. І ми сподіваємось на підтримку. Ми готуємо на цей місяць зустрічі в Канаді саме по цьому пункту формули миру щодо гуманітарних питань. Я запросив Ватикан взяти участь. І тут, в Німеччині, і вчора за один день одразу в 3 країнах – Британія, Франція і Італія – я представив лідерам Європи наш план перемоги. Прем'єр-міністру Стармеру, президенту Макрону, главі уряду Італії Джорджо Мелоні і сьогодні в розмові з Олафом. Всі деталі нашої стратегії наближення миру, геополітичні, військові, економічні. Пояснили в Лондоні, яка далекобійність зараз потрібна і яке наше бачення, щоб зміцнити фронт. І дуже хороша розмова була з Еммануелем. І Франція багато в чому вже допомогла нам об'єднати інших партнерів. Зараз розраховуємо саме на таке лідерство. Італія дуже принципова позиція Джорджії, чітке розуміння наших мотивів, потреб Європи. Я дякую Олафу за сьогоднішню нашу розмову. Всі деталі у Німеччині є і щодо воєнних аспектів, і щодо геополітичних та економічних. І ми повинні діяти разом, і кожен, хто має необхідну силу, необхідний вплив, щоб гарантувати надійний мир, щоб примусити Росію до миру. Але діяти треба зараз, цими місяцями. Посилити наших хлопців на фронті, посилити наші спільні позиції. І тепер на рівні команд ми будемо працювати з партнерами в Європі, щоб максимально наповнити кожен запланований крок. І цей наш план має привести до дієвого другого саміту миру, щоб війна завершилась, щоб це було справедливе, чесне завершення війни. І ще одне. Я вдячний Хорватії, усім партнерам на Балканах та в регіоні Південно-Східної Європи за вже 3-й наш саміт, цей формат, який допомагає берегти європейську єдність. Я дякую всім за підтримку формули миру і формату саміту миру. Я впевнений, що план перемоги, якщо партнери дійсно рішучо будуть з нами, стане надійним мостом між ситуацією зараз і миром, якого ми всі так прагнемо. Я дякую всім, хто з України. Я пишаюся нашими людьми. Світ з Україною вже 3-й рік цієї війни. Бо наші люди, саме люди такі, мільйони українців, вони заслуговують на підтримку. Слава Україні!
And Rom
And
Slava.
Hiram Slava.
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 961 of the news of the war in Ukraine. And that moves us on into the second segment, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And we will talk to each and every single one of y'all. It is an incredibly fun segment because we really do get to talk about anything and everything. Y'all get to bring up anything y'all want to talk about, and we get to talk about that with y'all. It's great fun, incredible fun. We can talk about the war. We can talk about what's going on in the Middle East. We can talk about what's going on in East Asia. Or as Patrol said, we can talk about trains, which is one of my topics. We can talk about history. We can talk about cars. We can talk about planes. We can talk about ships. We can talk about literally anything y'all want to. Like, literally anything's on the table. Whether I know a lot about it or not, though, maybe up to the question. Matthew might know a lot more on some things than me, but we can still give it a shot. And what more fun can we have than that? And so with that, Matthew, take it away. What do we got?
All right, so jumping into our final question segment of the night, the most highly anticipated part of the stream. Every single time we run it, we don't have any more polls to address. So with that, we're jumping right back into our super chat segment here, and our first one is going to go to KG, who's of course a longtime channel legend and puts in a $50 donation. And huge thanks to KG for that very generous support. And he said, "Have you ever played Age of Empires? And those dictators were always threatening because they were on a weak position." And same here.
An interesting point. I have never actually played Age of Empires. I don't think I've played any of them, actually. But I have played other games that are kind of like them. Sid Meier's Civ 6 is one. Let me think of them, actually. What games have I played like this? Hearts of Iron 4, Victoria 3, Victoria 2. Let's see, there's Civ 6, of course. I think those are mostly the main ones. And Civ 6 is probably the one most similar to Age of Empires. Actually, no. I played Humankind, which sucked, and everyone said it sucked. It was a very big disappointment to me with how the game played. Because how the hell can you be the Messenians in one age and then go to the next one and be the damn English? Like, that makes no sense to me. Like, you should pick a civilization and then stick with it for the rest of the game and just evolve. You know, because that's what everyone thought it would be. But it makes no damn sense to just switch from thing to thing. Like in this game, Matthew, I just want you to know this because this is how stupid this game was. Like, you would sit there and it would be like, okay, what do you want to pick? And you'd be like, I want to be the Egyptians. Okay, cool. And then the next age would begin. Like, you would move into like the next age. So you move from like the Bronze Age to like the Iron Age or something like that. And then they'd be like, okay, let's see, what do you want to be now? And then you could like pick crap like the Greeks. It's like, what the hell? It's like, how the hell can you go from being an Egyptian to a Greek? Like, I thought I would stay with the Egyptians the whole game, you know, and like just kind of like evolve into something else. I didn't get that at all. Also, by the way, Polly Smith, this is a good point because I forgot about these. I have played a lot of the Total Wars, mostly the ones though that have to do with the 18th century or the 19th century. So Napoleon Total War, Empire Total War, and then I played a couple of the medieval ones, like Total War Thrones of Britannia, which was all right. A lot of people crapped on that one. I thought it was okay. So I played those, and I'm trying to think of the rest of them. There are some that I've played, and I just cannot remember them for the life of me. And so, let's see here. Some people are bringing, let's see. Oh, yeah, and then there's Europa Universalis 4, I think is what it's called, and Crusader Kings 3. I've also played those. And all of them were good, but yeah, you do get that feeling from the Russians that they're in a desperate position like that, and they're making desperate moves, because in a game like that, I would be making these kinds of desperate moves if I was in a tough spot. So I would completely agree with that 100%, that this does seem to be very similar to me, at least. Another cool thing, though, that I would like to throw in about Vic 3, which if y'all have ever played it, it's an incredibly cool game. So to explain this one to people who may have not played it before, Victoria 3 is a game that is set from the 1830s to the late 1930s, literally like the beginning of World War II, around 1936 or so. And over the course of those 100 years, you run a country in the world. So you can pick anyone. You could even pick like an obscure country in the middle of Central Africa and play that country the whole game. it's a really cool game. Usually I play a big country like the United States in that game, and then I build America into what I think it should have been by the end of the 19th century, moving on to the 20th. So what I usually do is I create like the Pax Americana. I literally just curb stomp everyone in America and turn them into an American puppet. Pretty much, so all of North and South America is American aligned. It feeds.
Man, that sounds like what the CIA does in real life.
Man, it really does, doesn't it? And it works. It works every time. It works like a charm, man. And then America's so strong by the end of the game, it's dwarfing everyone, including the British. I love doing that. It's so fun. And not only that, I get to develop America into what it should be, a great country. And it's a great country already, but it, kind of go through that again, like the ebb and flow of it as it happened in real life. It's always fun to me to do that. But anyways, moving on from that, I always love those games. Currently, right now, though, just to let y'all know, to kind of like share a little bit with what I do gaming-wise in the background, because we don't have a gaming channel or anything, and I don't think we'll ever start one. But what I am doing right now is I'm playing this game obsessively whenever I have free time, and it's called Railroader. And let me go see if I can get it for y'all on Steam and show it to y'all. It's incredibly cool. So Railroader is a game that takes place in the Appalachian Mountains. It actually takes place in a specific spot. And I think I talked about this the other day a little bit, but it's up here near Asheville, where the western North Carolina floods are currently happening right now. And it runs from Silva right here. So from this town, and I think the rail yard used to be somewhere around here, if I remember right. Yeah, you can actually see the railroad track through here. And I think the rail yard and the interchange and everything is somewhere around here specifically. There's like a paper mill down here. Yeah, here it is. There's the paper. Crazy, dude. There's the paper mill is still here from the game, like because the game's set in like 1955. But anyways, you run a railroad, a short line railroad that existed in this area during the time, and it's set in 1955. It runs all the way from Silva all the way up to Bryson City, and then you can expand it from there to include Alarka, Almond, Wesser, Nanthala, and I think it goes all the way down to like Murphy or something like that, pretty much all the way down to the Georgia border. So it's an incredibly long route that you can end up turning this thing into. And this is such a cool game because there's so many different kinds of locomotives that you can have. There's so much you can do because you're literally running like a railroad company. It's like the funnest game ever, at least like because you can get into like the management side of things, or you can get into the actual railroading side of things and actually run the trains. You're doing everything. Like it's an actual railroading company. And I've just been loving this game. It's one of the funnest that I've ever played in like the railroading sphere. And if I could ever recommend one to anyone, it would be this one. It's just the greatest ever. And there's another one that's coming out. I actually reached out to one of the people who is making this game because one of y'all brought it up to me, and I was absolutely blown away by this one. It's called Century of Steam. And this one's incredibly cool. It's a lot like Railroads Online, but it's based on a narrow gauge. Well, it is like Railroads Online in that it's a narrow gauge railroad that's being recreated. There's going to be several maps inspired by real life areas like the southeast, the northeast, the northwest, and then the southwest. So you'll have a lot of variety. But it is so cool. I've been checking out this game since y'all brought it up to me and like keeping an eye on the updates that have been coming out. I've even reached out to one of the YouTubers that's actually involved in making this game. I tried to ask him when it was going to be ready, and they kind of gave me the answer I'd give to someone. They were like, it's going to be ready when it will be ready, because like no one ever has like an actual timetable for this stuff. Like I know we don't on like the merch store. We just try and figure it out when we can. But this is an incredibly cool game. Like I have very high hopes for this thing. It's looking amazing even in like the pre-alpha stage. I'm wishing the folks over there that are working on that thing the best of luck. It's truly amazing. I will be one of the people first in line to get this game when it comes out. And if y'all know the YouTuber who is kind of like the president of this studio 346 that is making this thing, let him know that I'm behind this thing 100%. I just think it's incredibly cool, and I love what they're doing with it. It's really neat. But yeah, those are kind of the games I'm stuck on right now because it's a nice change from like the fast tempo fighting games in like war games, which I'm used to, and it's a lot calmer, more relaxed, and also I just find it to be like honestly a little bit more entertaining, although it's a lot slower. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I thank you so much once again for support, KG. I literally went on a giant rabbit hole about railroading games. But I've been just having a blast with it. I wish I could show y'all a little bit more. Maybe one day I'll actually put a video out on Patreon for all the patrons so you can see what I'm talking about with that. I don't know when I could do something like that. Maybe sometime soon. But still, a huge thanks to you once again, KG. I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much once again for throwing in such an interesting observation, including video games. Because video games are always a good way to spend a little bit of free time. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat here, we have a very generous $50 donation from Chelsea Huffman, and thank you very much, Chelsea, for that very generous support. We appreciate it very much. And also, real quick, I was scrolling back up to see something real quick in the live chat. Let me scroll back up here. That is your first ever super chat on the live stream. I was just trying to make sure before I said that. Huge thanks for your first ever super chat. We appreciate that very much. And Chelsea said, I love you guys, and your show is addictive. Like a war show, history, beautiful mind, and Beavis and Butthead. Hey, I'll take that. It said, do you think the Wildberries shootout, the article on Radio Free Europe, had something to do with the blood feud?
And I thank you so much for the support, Chelsea Huffman, and thank you for saying that you're addicted. People will call us all kinds of things. Beavis and Butthead is not the worst we've heard, so I'll take that as a compliment. And I got to thank you so much for saying that, because it's probably true. We probably do sound like that a little bit. We also got, I think, called Cheech and Chong. I don't even know who the hell those people are, but we got called that yesterday. So I was like, oh, okay. But beyond that, thank you so much for the kind words. And also, do you think the Wildberry shootout, I haven't seen that article. If you're talking about the one that happened in Ingushetia, it probably is. From what I would know, because it's very closely related to it, and it's also dealing with a group in the FSB that would be dealing with an uprising from the Chechens if it was to happen. So I have a feeling it probably is related in a sense. And so with that,
Oh yeah, and the Wildberries shootout, that is that shootout, by the way. It had something to do with the Wildberries company in Russia. I'm not really sure what the Wildberries company is, but allegedly some of these people were involved with it, and maybe that was a secondary reason behind it. But I'm still leaning toward Kadyrov, honestly. I think it might have been part of the blood feud.
I honestly think it probably was a part of the blood feud, because from what we can tell, it seems that it would be very closely related due to geographical coincidence, along with the coincidence of the statement made yesterday and the action taken today. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for that massive support, Chelsea, and your first time supporting the channel ever. That is a huge milestone for a lot of people, because the thing is that with YouTube, people usually don't directly support channels, and that's something that we accept as a norm. I mean, we don't expect people to be going out of their way to support this channel and help it to keep on running. We don't even really want people to do that if they don't want to. Like, unless you just feel like wildly compelled, like, I love this channel and I want to help them to keep running, then you can support. But, you know, we're not like just like trying to shove it down people's throats like others do, like get a channel membership, give me money or something like that. I just feel like that's like a wrong way to run a news channel that's actually about news. But still, folks like you who support for the first time ever, come around not that often, actually. It takes a lot for someone to overcome the hurdle in their head where they would want to support a channel directly, and I gotta thank you for doing that, because that support is massive. A $50 super chat is absolutely huge. YouTube takes about 30% of each super chat, so we end up making, I think, out of that $50 super chat, like 30-something bucks. But still, that support is huge. Like 30-something bucks, even after YouTube takes their cut of it, is massive, and it helps us to make this thing possible, and it helps us to keep this thing rolling day in and day out. And I got to thank you so much, Chelsea, for enjoying the channel enough that you would support us and help us to keep this thing running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here tomorrow, tonight, and well on into the future. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Davo LBC once again, who puts in another donation. It's a $50 donation this time, and thank you very much, Davo, for that support. We appreciate that once again. And he says, LSA Lieutenant Davo LBC reporting, and who loves you, pretty baby? Who's going to help you through the night? Very interesting. I'm assuming that's song lyrics, by the way.
I'm assuming that as well, because beyond that, I don't know how to take that, man. I don't know what to say to that. But I still thank you so much for the support and helping this thing to keep on running. Lieutenant Davo, LBC. And I got to thank you once again for the massive support, because you are helping to make this thing possible, and you're helping us to keep this thing rolling. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And I gotta thank you massively for that because once again, if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here. We wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. We wouldn't be able to keep the LSA alive. And so, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that the best I can, at least at the moment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on here to our next one. And also, someone said it is lyrics. Michael McMahon said it is. I was assuming it was. I was like, I don't know what this has to do with anything right now. And I'm like sitting here trying to figure out, I'm like, what does this mean? Is this like a hidden message or something behind it? So I wasn't sure. But anyways, thank you very much, Davo. Was like seriously speaking for that support, though, and we appreciate it. And with that, we're moving on to our next one, which goes to KG, who throws in their second super chat of the night. A very, very big donation, by the way, a $50 donation, and we appreciate it very much. Along lasting donation. And KG says people don't realize that Russia has nukes aimed at China also, and China is actually their biggest threat because they took territory from China, and China wants trade stability, so they're pretending to be Russia's friend for now.
And I thank you for the support. And that's actually true. Like, a lot of people don't know this, but China and Russia aren't chummy friends. At least historically, they've never really been. They've actually gotten into some very heavy border clashes in the 60s, the 70s, and also the 80s. You can see that referenced in pop culture even at the time. When the movie Red Dawn came out in the 80s, it was actually mentioned that the communist Chinese joined the United States in the war against the Soviet Union and got nuked for it, cutting their population in half, at least in the hypothetical story put out by the movie Red Dawn. And that shows you all kind of like the political, well, really not the political, but the diplomatic environment that existed at that time. China and Russia were not friends. China was actually closer to America than they were to the Soviet Union at that time. And that's a really big thing. They only have been getting a little chummy with each other recently. And that's really because China is trying to find a way to get cheap resources in mass and in bulk. And really one of the few countries to do that from is from Russia at the moment. And that's why they're doing this very thing. So I would agree with you completely. They're really just trying to chum up with the Russians for now. Just for that reason, but China does have greater ambitions, and some of them are reclaiming a large amount of the little islands that are in the Amur River that the Russians claim is theirs, but the Chinese believe are theirs. Also something cool here, by the way, if y'all want to know something neat, you can actually see here on the little border marking that it says Russia and China in English, and then over here it actually shows it in the native languages. The top one says Russia, or Russia, which means Russia, and then this bottom one here, which just kind of looks like symbols, that actually is Zhonghua, which is China in Chinese, or Mandarin as it's called. So if you ever wondered what in the world does the name China look like in Chinese, it actually looks like this. And what's really cool is that America is not that different in Chinese naming conventions. America, like the United States, is called Megua, which stands for America. So that's actually kind of cool. They actually sound pretty similar to each other, Zhonghua and Megua, but of course, two completely different countries. Just wanted to share that with y'all, just in case y'all are wondering, what in the world is that? That is how China is spelled in Mandarin. So that's just kind of neat. Just kind of a cool fact to know. But anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for support, KG, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because I got to thank you for the massive support tonight. That is your second $50 super chat, and that support is helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to thank you massively for that once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $22 super chat from Snowy. And thank you very much, Snowy, as well, for that $22 donation, and we appreciate it very, very much. And also, I was scrolling through here once again to see and check something else, because I did not put it down the spreadsheet. This is not your first super chat, by the way, and it was put in, actually, a €22 donation. Once again, huge thanks to you. And they said, part of the Kerch Bridge sits in Ukrainian waters, and what prevents Ukraine from using ATACMS, Storm Shadows, or Scalp EG to hit the bridge there? And that is not Russian territory. And P.S. Could EPS 1000 be a home tour of your setup?
That would be an interesting idea, Snowy, to do a home tour of the setup. However, there is a big concern to be had for doxing. Because we have a very sick group of people kind of led by this guy called the Hot Dog Man. We don't actually say his name ever because we're not going to give him any credibility or credence, but they would dox us. And one thing I can say is that Enforcer Studio 2.0 is not in the same house that Enforcer Studio 1.0 was in. It's in an entirely different place. And we really don't want to make that much of a video of it or show a lot of it if we don't have to, because we will probably end up getting doxxed again. And with being doxxed, there's a decent amount of security risk and concern to be put out there, because there was a lot to be said the last time we got doxxed. People were trying to call in different kinds of things against us, trying to have us swatted at our law school when we were going to law school, also trying to do things to us while we were at our house, you know, mailing us odd things directly to our home address there. That's why we ended up getting a P.O. box, because, you know, we were trying to make sure to send people more so that way. But it's something that we really don't want to do, because, you know, we could end up running into those problems again, and we're really hoping that hopefully we've avoided those problems this time, and we're not going to be endlessly harassed by like a group of people like that again, because it is like, people don't know this, but during a very specific stint of time for about an entire year, our lives were absolute hell because of those people. Like, they went out of their way to make sure to try and harass us at every single step, and they've honestly made it to where we've kind of had to lock down a lot of what we do and talk and you know, in talking about it, because they will go out of their way to try and ruin anything if they know where we are or what we're doing at any specific moment. So I hate to say that we probably wouldn't be able to do that, but I would love to do that. It's just that we have to kind of like look out for the security side of things and make sure that we're not going to be harassed for like another straight year because of something like that. But beyond that, I will say, as far as the rest of the question goes, the Ukrainians have hit the bridge several times before, especially on the Ukrainian side around here. They have done that a lot, and they could do it again if they wanted to. The issue with that, though, is that we don't really know if they are given permission to hit the bridge with Western weaponry, like ATACMS or Storm Shadows or Scalp EGs, because they've had them for a while, but we've never seen them hit the bridge. And we actually think that this may be some sort of a forbidden target, but really on kind of like a shadow level, where we're not really told about that a lot. Like, we're not told that that is something that is a forbidden target a great deal. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and I thank you so much once again for support, snowing and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to keep this thing running, and we would not be able to make this thing possible. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and with that, we are on to the next one. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Davo LBC yet again, and he put in a $20 donation this time, and thank you very much, Davo, for the support once again. I think that's the second or third super chat of the night, and I appreciate that very much, and so does the Enforcer. And he said, LSA Lieutenant Davo LBC reporting, and I have a question. Is it possible to build communism in a random capitalist country, like, say, the Netherlands? And the answer is, of course, it's possible, but what have the Netherlands ever done to you?
That's a pretty good one.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one, Davo. We see it. I got to thank you for the support and helping the channel to keep on running, too. That was a really good joke with a good punchline there. I appreciate it. But in all honesty, though, to actually add a little bit of like a kind of like a rabbit hole to this thing, I would have to say that creating communism in any country is a really bad idea, kind of like creating a fascist state, because centrally planned economies just don't work. Like, it's just been proven time and time again they don't, and I don't know why some people would still cling to the idea that communism can work, because it literally can't work in a vacuum. Like, I don't think there's any real place where communism could work successfully, or fascism, because a lot of people don't know this, but fascism isn't just an authoritarian government. Fascism, a lot like communism, actually has an economic model set forth behind it, and usually fascist societies believe, like fascist governments believe, that a completely self-sufficient country is the only way a country can run. And the best example of a fascist state that survived for a while that could be considered a failure was actually Spain, because during the Spanish Civil War, Francisco Franco and his fascist faction in the Civil War ended up winning, and Francisco Franco ran Spain from the end of that Civil War in the 30s all the way up until, I believe, the mid to late 70s when he died. And Spain was literally in an endless depression, an economic depression during that entire time, because they practically refused to trade with anyone for anything. And so some basic raw materials were non-existent in Spain. And so much like a communist economic system, a centrally planned economy, does not work. The complete self-sufficiency, or as it's really called in Mein Kampf, autarky, just does not work in practice. It's an absolutely insane kind of a concept, and they're just extreme. Like, they're so extreme in economic principle, neither of them will ever work. And I don't know why people always cling to them. Like, oh, you know, if we like install this flavor of an authoritarian regime, it'll work this time. Because, you know, fascism, like in fascism and communism, according to the goons who believe in this stuff, it always just hasn't worked because it hasn't been done right. But we should submit an entire nation like ours to experiment that is doomed to fail, just so that way we can see it fail again and then go, oh, look, it failed again, which is a completely stupid kind of a mindset to have. So going on it with the Netherlands, if you put a communist government in charge of the Netherlands, that would be horrific. Like, imagine a communist government in the Netherlands, and someone's going to say something like socialism is communism. It's really not. Like, socialism is like communism light. Like, that's the best way I can explain it, because the government is still democratic, but the economic system is getting kind of like into a centrally planned economy, or it's kind of getting really close to that, and it also has like the kind of welfare state elements of a communist state. Not to say that welfare in general is like a communist thing. Like, there's a certain amount of welfare that's just present anywhere, but once you get to a certain extreme, then it starts to enter kind of like the communist level of welfare. And, you know, and that's different for different people. People define that differently. But beyond that, the Netherlands really isn't. Like, the closest I can actually say that a country got to really being socialist was actually the United Kingdom under Clement Attlee at the end of World War II. Some British people may or may not know this, but Clement Attlee was actually the prime minister that came after Winston Churchill. And Clement Attlee was really socialist. I mean, like, he was very socialist. He was the leader of the Labour Party. He was the prime minister of the Labour Party. And the Labour Party, if y'all don't know, just to kind of like add in a little bit of like British political context, is a socialist party. Like, that's literally their thing. Their emblem, well, their flag is the red flag of socialism, and they largely popped up and kind of destroyed the Liberal Democrats, which was the major party that existed before the Labour Party at the very beginning of the 1900s. And they've pretty much been the well, they've kind of replaced the Liberal Democrats since then, although technically the Liberal Democrats still exist in the House of Commons, but they only have like 7 seats, I think, so they're really like non-existent. But anyways, they brought forward a pretty heavily socialized kind of a economic model, and it didn't go well. Like, they started to reverse it kind of quickly. I think over like the next 2 decades, most things have been kind of privatized again, but they literally nationalized every single heavy industry. So all of the railroads of Britain, it got nationalized into British Rail. All of the steel companies in the United Kingdom got nationalized into, I believe it was called British Steel or something along those lines. And they nationalized every single heavy industry. And it didn't bode them well, because instead of it being up to private economic ebb and flows and you know, the general competitiveness of the market, which is a good thing in many ways and also a detractor in others, the central government now had to do all of that competitive planning, which central governments just aren't competitive as a structure. That, like, a government is never supposed to be designed for competitiveness, because there is no competitor to a government. So the planning was horrendous, and a lot of the United Kingdom's really forward kind of industries, like the steel industry, like the shipbuilding industries, and also the aviation industry, practically all died by the time they got privatized again a couple of decades later, and were in horrendous shape. Now, of course, when we get to the railroads, which is a whole other thing in the United Kingdom, the railroads were already doing kind of like rough when they got nationalized, but under nationalization, they did even worse. And so then the British in the 90s, well, in the late 80s, they decided to privatize all the railroads again. And then they privatized them all, and then they started doing worse privatized. Like, the British railroad system just keeps on doing worse and worse. Like, no matter whether it's privatized or nationalized, there's really like no solution to it. Like, the prices just keep on going insane, or the service gets worse. It's one or the other. And it's really a horrendous situation over there. I love British railroading, though. I think it's incredibly cool. But there is a pretty decent amount of issues with British railroads, just as they are. Kind of like how American railroads have our own issues. But beyond that, I hope that does address that well. I know that was a good joke, Davo LBC, but I had to throw in like an additional little bit about like fascism and communism, and also a little bit about socialism. So I hope that does address that well. And I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next one here, we're going to get to a $20 donation from guess who? It's Glock Glock Who's There, LSA. And thank you very much, Glock Glock, for that support as well. And it said, what a pincer movement, not work from the north and south on the Russian salient near Pokrovsk.
That is an interesting question, and that is one that we brought up a couple of times here in this channel. We don't really think it is possible because we have seen that the Ukrainians have held this area around Oleksandropol and also down here somewhat well, but it hasn't been well enough, at least on like the best explanation I can give. This area is kind of fighting a defensive battle right now, and this area hasn't really been able to break through either, so there's no way to conduct a pincer movement because this part of the pincer cannot move. It's currently engaged and fixed in combat, and this position up here might be able to move, but they wouldn't be ever able to meet a pincer from the southern side because they can't break out. So in my opinion, it's possible, but it will require more stabilization and for the battle to be going more in Ukraine's favor, at least on the far flanks on the north and south. So it's possible, but at least not with the current conditions we're seeing. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. Glock Glock Who's There, LSA, and I love the name. It's an incredibly good one. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one's going to go to Sobi, who puts in a $20 donation, and a huge shout out to Sobi for that support as well. And they put in a $20 donation and a super sticker of the YouTube lemon creature standing by a bush and absolutely just having a moment of rest, I guess, or something like that. It's sitting there reminiscing about stuff. But thank you very much, Sobi, for that support, and we appreciate it very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Sob, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. And so a massive thanks to you once again. Thank you for throwing in a nice little super sticker, a nice appreciative super sticker. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. Also, Maddie, I just saw someone say, Monster Lab said in the chat, I used to love to ride trains until I moved to downtown LA. Crazy people drama every ride. And let's see. And someone's and they say crazy narcissistic people like trains because they have a captive audience. You know, that's one thing I gotta say, like as far as like a standalone thing. Everyone in America wants public transportation, but they're scared of public transportation because of the crazy people that are naturally going to get on it and then act like they have a right to be crazy and force everyone else to deal with it. Here's what I say, folks. This is going to be my answer to it. And this might be a little bit of an out there one. But I say people like that need to be kicked off and banned from ever riding public transportation, period. If they want to act like idiots, they can go buy a car. But they're not going to put everyone else through torture on a train or a bus or a plane because they want to act like an idiot. Like, that's my personal opinion on that. I'm so sick and tired of crazy people ruining everything in this country because it's always just a small little tiny group. I mean, it's the tiniest group. There are so many people out there who will just ride a train and they'll sit there and they'll just act like normal people. And then there's that one lunatic who's going to crap in the hall and then start smearing it on the windows just because they can. Those people need to be thrown off the trains. They need to be arrested for public indecency, and they need to be put in a mental institution or something like that because these people are obviously not well, and the entirety of society can't be scared to take advantage of public benefits because of insane nuts that show up here and there. It annoys the hell out of me because everyone in America goes, like, I know everyone in America because I talk to people and like, you know, well, I don't know everyone in America, but I know what everyone in America is thinking because I talk to people and everyone's always like, oh yeah, it would be nice to have trains that go from place to place, you know, like at a good high speed. But then you're going to have the crazy people on them. And it's like, that is the massive detractor to everything in this country, is that the damn crazy people take over everything. You can't get on a flight anymore without knowing that there's going to be some kind of a narcissistic asshole sitting beside you doing something stupid. And you can't get on a train, there's going to be some lunatic. Like, the lunatics have to be taken care of. I will actually tell you all this. I'm not going to get political with this, but I am going to tell you all this is my opinion. I think that the entire problem with this country in the modern day is that the mentally ill people who used to be in mental institutions were let out into society, and we have never done anything to fix that since. I think that's been the problem, because when you think about it, every single problem that the country has these days that people talk about and complain about is largely because of mentally ill people. Like, think about it. Every single time there's some sort of a heinous atrocity where someone takes a gun and they go into a school and they like wipe out an entire classroom of kids, it's always someone who's mentally ill. Every time anyone wants to use public transportation or go down to a public park, they can't, because there's always some sort of a crazy lunatic there that's running people away. There are crazy lunatics everywhere, and no one's doing anything to kind of get these people largely out of the way of scaring the general public. Like, that's the best way I can put it. And I feel like that's really what needs to be fixed. Like, if that problem was fixed, a lot of the problems that people think exist would largely go away and they wouldn't be an issue any longer. That's what I think. Like, I don't mean to be like that assertive on that, but I feel like that's a pretty solid kind of an assertion. Like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll admit, maybe I'm wrong, but I have a feeling that that's probably the problem. And let's see. Some people are saying, looks like, and crazily enough, it looks like almost all of y'all are agreeing. And I'm kind of shocked by that, Matthew, because Matthew was sitting there just a second ago. He was like, "Oh, be careful with this," and I was like, this is a hot take. Honestly, it really is. But I was like, I got to put this out there.
Oh, no, I'm not saying be careful. I'm not saying be careful because of the audience. I think a lot of people might agree with that. I'm just saying watch out for YouTube. I'm not sure if they'll like take comment to that or not.
Well, I don't think they'll mind too much, because it's it's not the craziest thing that has been said on YouTube, but that's what I think. I think that something needs to be done about this. Like, I will tell you all this. If you vote for me as president in 2040, and this has not been done by this point, that's always contingent on that, I am going to be trying to find a way to either fund for state governments mental institutions or federal mental institutions, so that way people like this who are getting to the point of conducting crimes because they're insane, so criminally insane, they will be put in a mental institution, so that way they're not afflicting that on everyone else in the general public. That would be that's something that I think I would largely have to start moving towards, because I can't say this enough. Every single time you think about anything these days, everyone's always scared of crazy people. And I mean, people are legitimately scared for their lives. Like, that's the thing about it. Like, you can't go down to a public park because one of the lunatics down there that's literally hanging out down there all day long could just pull out a shiv and stab you in the neck and kill you. Like people are legitimately scared to go do things, not because they're just wusses and they're scared of dangerous looking people. These people are actually dangerous. That's why people don't go near them. And for some reason, we just keep letting them get away with this behavior and deny everyone the ability to enjoy the merits of what their taxes are paying for. Like, if your public tax dollars are going to a park or to running a rail service or to running anything, you should be able to enjoy that without the fear of some crazy lunatic coming up and harassing you or harming you. That should be just a basic understanding in this country, that would be the way it is. Like, I'm 100% behind that. I don't feel like that's a really political thing, to be entirely honest. I feel like it's just like a common sense point at this juncture in the country, and it seems like a lot of people are agreeing with that. And so with that, I thank you all once again for listening to that little like soapbox kind of a rant right there, because that's something that I always feel strongly about, and no one ever thinks about it like that. Everyone always thinks about it in abstract other ways. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Soap, and I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Adam McLean, who's a channel legend and puts in a $20 donation. And huge shout out to Adam for that support. But he did make a mistake. He said, I hooked up with Chris's mom last week.
No.
And I did it for the conquest, he said. And now I'm ghosting her.
Oh, no. And she's here. She's here tonight. And
Oh, my.
And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. And I gotta say, a big thanks to you once again, Adam McLean, for throwing in another Chris's mom joke. That's just a classic right there. And I gotta thank you so much once again for helping this thing to possible and helping us to keep this thing running. And so with that, Thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one right here goes to Davo LBC, who puts in yet another support. And Davo is supporting us tremendously tonight, and huge shout out to Davo for that. And he put in that 20. And also, Davo said something earlier like, "Oh, what did I do? LOL." Nothing. I'm not sure if there was maybe Nightbot coming in there or something like that, but I didn't see anything, so I'm not sure what was going on with that. But hopefully, Nightbot was not acting up or misbehaving or anything like that. But Davo, thank you very much for the support. And he said a little angel dropped by this money to donate to you guys on behalf of David Tablet. So a shout out to him would be much appreciated.
Hey, and a big shout out to David Tablet. David Tablet has been around for a long time in the live chat, and I've seen David Tablet down there a good bit recently, like since we've been back. And I got to thank you so much once again, David Tablet, and you as well, Davo LBC, both of y'all, for enjoying this channel and supporting it and helping it to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for the both of y'all, we wouldn't be able to be here. If it wasn't for the entirety of the LSA, we wouldn't be able to be here each and every single day. And so a big thanks to both of y'all. Once again, I just can't thank any of y'all enough for what y'all have done to inspire us, to motivate us to keep this channel running, and not only that, to actually help us to be able to keep the lights on and keep everything running as well. And so a huge thanks once again. I hope that just addressed that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to GunFox61, also known as the Medic Fox, recently renamed the Medic Fox, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, GunFox61, for that support. Excuse me. And also, he did get off for the night already, so hopefully he's hearing this tomorrow. But he said the 17th of February through 16th of March in 1979, Sino-Vietnamese sack of Wexford took place from 2nd to 11th of October in 1649. And at 1968, Apollo 7 launched, and also in 1899, the Boer War begins in South Africa, and in 1915, Bulgaria enters World War I. And also, question from the chat.
I gotta thank you so much, GunFox61, for throwing in a really cool day in history. And it's really interesting to know that in 1899, the Boer War began in Southern Africa. And I know I mispronounced that. I've never been able to pronounce that name correctly. But one thing y'all may be interested to know, this is actually something that's wildly interesting. And it's kind of a bit of a more morbid side of history, but still, it's one that's very interesting. Matthew, did you know that the first, this is going to sound wild, the first concentration camps ever made in the world weren't made in Nazi Germany in World War II. They were actually made in South Africa in the Boer War in 1899. Did you know that?
I actually did know that, actually. That was very, very brutal down there.
Yeah, it was incredibly brutal. This is actually something that and many of y'all will be interested to know this as well. The guy who was in charge of coming up with that idea and pretty much interring the entire Boer population in the concentration camps was none other than the World War I hero, Lord Kitchener, who created Lord Kitchener's Army, which was an army of volunteers that was raised at the beginning of World War I. This was probably the most insane thing that the British did, and it actually got a lot of negative press when it happened in Britain, because people like Winston Churchill actually were down there as journalists and actually documented the atrocities of these camps. Like when I say there were concentration camps, they weren't like death camps like you saw in Germany in World War II, but the conditions were squalor and horrendous, and people were dying of diseases in these camps in incredibly high numbers, and it was not looked at favorably even by the British inside of Britain at the time, and it was something of a great controversy, but it still did happen. So technically, the first people who ever created a concentration camp in the world was actually the British Empire and not Germany. So that's actually kind of an interesting fact. But beyond that, one thing I will say is that the Boer Wars were incredibly interesting because it was such a weird war. I would say that's like the first in my mind, and you could really expand this timetable to wherever you want. That's the first like war against an insurgency that you would see that really looks like a modern one, because the British were having to do things that we did in the modern day in Afghanistan way back then. Like they would build blockhouses throughout the entirety of really the Boer lands, where British soldiers would just sit all day long. They were like little fobs or little checkpoints. And if anyone tried to attack them, the blockhouses were well armored enough that they could just wait it out and really kind of hold their own ground in that area until reinforcements arrived. They were doing all kinds of things, even way back then, that literally looked like the same counterinsurgency operations that were being conducted by the United States in Afghanistan. So pretty wild to see the Boer War. It's one that's always been very interesting to me, at least on how that war was fought and the kind of things that they did, because it doesn't seem as though a lot of people were really big fans of what happened at all in the first or the second Boer War down there. And I believe there was actually 3 of those wars, but the third one I think is kind of forgotten if I'm remembering that correctly. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that part of the day in history fairly well. And also, with Bulgaria entering World War I forgot whose side they entered on. I think they entered on... let me think. I think they actually entered on the Central Power side in support of Turkey, Germany, and Austria-Hungary, if I remember correctly. But I can't remember that exactly, because Bulgaria was kind of really didn't do anything. I mean, they were almost like there for moral support. But I think they did join the Central Powers, if I remember correctly. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, GunFox61, Medic Fox, for helping this channel to keep on running and making this thing possible. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep this thing running. And so thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, in our next super chat is going to go to a channel legend, Andy L, who puts in a $20 donation. And I think Andy already left for the night as well, but thank you very much, Andy, for that $20 support. And he said, I'm currently working on North Carolina, Tennessee, and Florida, and help, but love you guys, and you're doing great.
And thank you so much for the support, Andy Ellen. Great to hear that you're helping out folks here in the United States. There are a lot of people who are having tough times out there in places like Asheville, North Carolina, and really throughout the entirety of the Appalachian Mountains. Right now, at least on the southern side, it has been tough down there, and I'm hoping that things are going to be improving down there. Things are going to be doing even better, and we've even had some folks here watching the channel that are actually out there helping out right now. And to all of those folks, I wish y'all the best. Y'all are doing absolutely amazing work out there, helping out and hopefully improving people's lives. It's certainly something that is a job of amazing, upstanding citizens to be able to go out there and do, and I hope that y'all are doing an incredible and great job at that right now. And I also got to say, on addition to that, I hope that you're helping out massively as well, Andy L, because I'm sure every single effort from every single person is greatly appreciated by the folks who are out there right now having to rough this thing out. And so a huge thanks to you once again, and thank you so much for the kind words to this channel as well, and helping us to keep this thing running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to CIA Accounts Payable, Black Ops Accounting, who puts in a $20 donation, and the CIA check has finally arrived, and it is here, and I cannot believe it. And thank you very much, CIA, for that support. And they said invoice 00102981002.1. I love the specificity there. You always got to keep up that good old bureaucracy. And they said PSYOP number 75, Russian analysis.
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing running. And I gotta say, thank you so much once again for, of course, making sure to slide us a little from the CIA. Of course, it's a joke, but still, huge thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again. And also, I just saw someone say something, man. I don't know if you see that in the chat. It's from a certain someone saying something that seems to be a little political, if I'm understanding that correctly.
I'm not really sure. I can't tell. Is it?
It looks like it may be to me. It's saying something about we drank Kool-Aid from a certain political person. You see it?
Yeah, I see it now. I mean, what about it?
I'm wondering, is that within our politics rule, or no? Because I'm trying to make a judgment call on that one, because I'm not really sure if they're saying that to us or someone else, but it seems like that might be directed at us.
All right, then.
Okay, well, I was wondering if you make a judgment call on that, but okay. I think we're gonna have to make a judgment call on that, and let's see here. There we go. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to, excuse me, Jason Carney, who puts in a $15 donation, and thank you very much, Jason, as well for that support. And also, no comment attached to it, but Jason, thank you very much for that support. We appreciate it. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you so much for the support, Jason Carney, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. You help us to keep the lights on and help us to keep this thing running day in and day out. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here on air right now. And so a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that I addressed that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Plazath, who puts in an 11, and a huge shout out to Plazath as well for supporting the channel. And he said, I hope you guys are doing fine right now, and happy stream to everyone.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Plazath. And also, we are doing incredibly fine right now. We're doing great. I'll be honest, I'm actually kind of like burnt and exhausted at the moment. We haven't really had time to rest because, you know, not getting into a lot of what we did behind the scenes, but we have been going about 100 miles an hour for about the past week and a half. Like when we were off air, that wasn't really like a R&R time for us. We were literally kind of like running around the world at that moment, trying to get things lined up, trying to get our stuff to run the show and everything. You know, it was a very interesting time for sure. And I'll be honest with you, I think Matthew and me are still entirely exhausted by that at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. We're doing fine beyond that. It's just that I'm still exhausted. And to be entirely honest with y'all, with like the sleeping situation, we're sleeping on air mattresses right now, and that was fine for like the first 3 nights. But to be honest with y'all, I'm not getting a good night's sleep on that thing anymore, and so that's kind of starting to wear me down a little bit. So hopefully we can figure out something with that. But still, with that, I thank you so much once again for support, and thank you so much for wishing everyone a happy stream. I think they're gonna have an amazing stream. And so with that, thank you so much once again. We are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat of the night is going to go to, guess who? It's going to Ambi Pambi, who puts in an $11 donation. And thank you very much, Ambi, for that support. And they said a proctologist a proctologist grabbed his prescription pad and then looked around as he patted his pockets. And after pulling out a rectal thermometer, he cried out, "Damn, some asshole's got my pen." Oh my God.
Oh no.
No. Oh my God.
That's terrible, man.
That's a doozy.
Man, that's a doozy right there. One hell of a punchline. And I gotta say, thank you so much for the support. Thank you for throwing in a crazy joke. That was actually a pretty good one. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running and making this thing possible. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling. And so a massive thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and on that bombshell, we're moving on to this one, which goes to Khan, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Khan, for that support. I see the chat is reeling from that one right there. But Khan said Prigozhin and Kadyrov fought together in the battle for Bakhmut, and Kadyrov knows the betrayal of Prigozhin by Putin. And I think Putin is also planning to take out Lukashenko, and this could get interesting.
It could get interesting for sure. I mean, it is a battle of the worlds out there. I'm in between worlds. Matthew gets that one, but still, it is kind of a bit of a battle of the worlds out there at the moment. And let's see, I would agree. It could get really interesting for sure. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And I just looked back at the control room, and holy moly, that's insane right
Dang.
there. And so Matthew, what do we got there?
All right, so moving into our next super chat, excuse me, that damn cough, y'all, that cough will not go away. Y'all don't know how bad that bothers me, but anyways, this one goes to Patrol, who puts in a $300 donation, a massive amount of support, and huge thanks to Patrol for that support. And it said, go get a mattress. And also, Patrol, I wanted to say this real quick. First of all, that is massive, and thank you very much for that support while I get rid of a bot out of the chat. But I don't know about the Enforcer. Don't worry about us, folks. Like, we'll get it under control and everything like that. I'm sure y'all can tell that things are not totally like put together behind the scenes. Don't worry about it whatsoever. We are getting things hammered out and stuff like that. For example, the internet will be fixed in a week. So thank you all for bearing with us once again with that. And Patrol, thank you very much for that support as well. That's very nice of you. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you for the massive support, Patrol, and helping this channel to keep on running. That is an insane amount of support, especially considering that you already threw in a $100 super chat earlier tonight. You are, I think, $100 from the cap of what a YouTube allows in a single day. And I got to thank you so much for that. Now, as far as it goes with what I was saying a second ago, I don't really want people to be worried for us, but I do want to be honest with y'all. Like when you're like, hey, I hope it's ever going well. You know, it's like, well, you know, like we are, you know, sleeping on air mattresses. But beyond that, I don't ever want y'all to really have to worry a lot about what's going on behind the scenes. We don't want to be like a hot dog man putting out community posts where we literally just complain about, like, you know, life, or try and make it sound like life sucks for like sympathy points. We don't really want to do that, but considering that right now, I'm not gonna lie, I had a load of busy. Well, I had a load of nitro cold brew, like literally an entire like red solo cup of the stuff, and I'm still about to pass out right now. I was like, I think it may be because I'm not getting a lot of sleep on that bed. Like that's kind of why I brought it up. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support, and everything is going to be fine. We are going to have beds, like real beds, long-lasting beds, and we're also going to have real working internet beyond what we have right now, hopefully here in the near future. I just hope that everyone does have patience though for that, because that won't all happen instantly. So it is going to be a little bit touch and go a little bit as we're trying to do this right here. But we are trying to work with the cards we're dealt. And sometimes the cards aren't good. But one thing I can promise y'all is that we are going to be working around the clock like we always have been to make sure that this news gets out to y'all. We have always been dedicated to this, even when we were literally in the middle of trying to figure everything out, and we were having to do a very interesting setup. I don't know if we'll ever show y'all that. We actually took a picture of it to try and record the videos that we were putting out, at least once we started putting out videos again. It's been our mission to make sure the stream runs as uninterrupted as possible, because while things may be getting a little bit difficult, or sometimes things can be difficult behind the scenes, one thing will be sure: I will never, and Matthew will never, let the Lee Spring Army and this channel go down and out without a fight. We are going to fight as hard as we can to make sure that this channel stays on air pretty much uninterrupted, no matter what's going on. Because if y'all can show up every single day uninterrupted, no matter how tough y'all's day was, or how tiring y'all's day was, and if Ukrainian soldiers and the great soldiers of this amazing republic that we can live in can continue to stand watch against the enemies that we face around the world every single day without tiring, without fail, we will make sure to keep running this channel without tiring, without fail, every single day that we can, until the end of time for the large part. And so, huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, Patrol. And of course, absolutely amazing support right there. And we thank you massively for that. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat of the night is going to go to De Minimis RT, who puts in a $10 donation. Thank you very much, De Minimis, for that support. I think that is your first support, by the way, and there was no comment attached to it, but thank you very much for deciding to support the channel and helping to keep us running and providing the news, and we appreciate it. And we also have a 10 from Dave W, and Dave said, I think a red line would be if Putin is in danger of being deposed and losing his power.
I gotta thank you so much for the support, Dave W. And I'd agree with you. I think that would also be a red line as well, but I feel like that most likely arise from domestic issues inside of Russia more so than external. And so for that reason, we may see that that's a red line that's crossed with the Russian government, not really the Western world like NATO. But maybe it could be in some situations. Who knows? But still, I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep this thing rolling. And so a massive thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Feelin' Groovy, who puts in a $10 donation as well. Thank you very much, Feelin' Groovy, for that support. And they said, hey guys, you know, I remember Moscow Mike, Sally the Sockeye Salmon, Magic Sky Girl, but I must have missed Chris's mom day. And could you recap the story? And thanks and great job, LSA and Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, Feeling Groovy. And you've been around for a very long time. You remember Sally the Sockeye Salmon, because that was a really, really old thing. That's like 3 years old at this point, nearly. That's legendary at this point. And also, let's see, you missed the Chris's mom day. Now, the Chris's mom thing came up because we had a viewer named Chris. They were literally just named Chris. And we have loads of Chris's, but this one's been banned. So this doesn't affect any of the Chris's that are here right now. But there was a Chris that came in sometime and they were like saying some really crazy stuff to us, like just cussing us out, going ham in the chat. And so I said, you know, it may be a rough day for you, but it was even a rougher day for your mom. And then I just started going off on this guy's mom. Like I was just like, Chris's mom this, Chris's mom that. And since then, Chris's mom has been the butt of jokes on this channel since that point. I think that was like a year and a half ago when that happened. And we've just been keeping it up ever since. And so that is kind of where Chris's mom comes from. But as far as one of those that you mentioned, which is Magic Sky Girl, that is one that does not have a savory kind of a taste in our mouths with what went on with that. To explain what went on with that, they were a viewer like everyone else, and they were very nice, and we were very nice to them, and they were 100% behind this channel until, for some reason, there was a stupid kind of a thing that started going around that we were very political in a certain way. And all of y'all know, because it's 3 years later now, we're not political. We were never going to get political. We were literally just weeks away right now from the actual presidential election in the United States, and we still militantly enforce the no politics rule on this channel, and we do not come up with a political opinion that agrees with one side or the other. It's something that I am religiously dedicated to at this point of ensuring. But nevertheless, the Hot Dog Man and his little goon started to put out the story that we were extremely hard-leaning on one side of the political spectrum. And for some reason, that specific viewer believed that without hesitation at all. Like, didn't even ask me if I had a political affiliation. They literally overnight went from loving this channel to hating us and openly also doxing us and wishing, I think it was like death on us or something, on Twitter. Like, it was like the biggest 180 I've ever seen anyone do. Like, I don't even know the mental gymnastics needed to go from loving someone to hating them literally like in 30 minutes. But that's what happened with that person, and that's why I don't really want them to be remembered in a positive light on this channel, because I never did anything to them. Like, every time I literally, like, during that time when that happened, we had a Discord server. I remember getting in like 2 or 3 calls with that person and just talking with them and like discussing stuff with them and joking with them and stuff. And then they just flip on a dime over something that isn't even true. And it's like, that's a little stupid to me. Like, that was, like, if anything has ever been uncalled for, that was really uncalled for. And I was like, that's just the rudest thing ever, because I knew that they were political, like, in a certain way. Like, you could just tell. But it's like, I'm not going to hold that against someone, because someone, like, everyone's always a nice person regardless of the opinions they have. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well about that whole thing, because that one didn't end that well. Sally the Sockeye Salmon just disappeared at some point. I don't even know where, but they just eventually stopped showing up, and that was kind of the end of that. But that was a funny one when it was going on, because there was like an entire story to Sally the Sockeye Salmon that was going on. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat is going to go to GunFox61, the Medic Fox, once again, and they put in a 10. And thank you very much, GunFox, once again for that support. And they said 1776, Benedict Arnold fights valiantly at Valcour Island, and in 1492, Columbus reaches the New World, and in 2000, the USS Cole attacked by some bad people, and in 1945, conscientious objector awarded the Medal of Honor.
I gotta thank you so much for the support, GunFox61. I think that conscientious objector was the guy at Hacksaw Ridge at Okinawa, if I remember that correctly. I'm not really sure if I am remembering that right, so correct me if I'm wrong. But that's still pretty cool to hear. And I got to thank you so much for the support and sharing another day in history, because today was a very eventful day in history, no doubt about it, especially with the New World being discovered on this day. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And Matthew, I'm going to have to stop you right there, because none of the audio is coming through. I can hear you out there, but I can't hear any of your audio.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, the internet is trash. But anyways, moving on here to our next super chats. We have a $10 donation from Joseph Mann, as well as a $5 donation from Mark Andre Brunette. And once again, they are both channel legends. Thank you very much, Joseph and Mark, for that support. I do not see comments attached to them, but thank you very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the support to Joseph Mann and Marc-Andre Brunette for the support and help with this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And so a massive thanks once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also one day, I hope that the internet providers can get the 5G thing like figured out one day, because it seems like it's probably pretty good if it would work right, but you know, it's just not that good. And we're pretty close to a cell tower too, so it's not working. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat. This one goes to Michael Thomas, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Michael, for the 10. And he says, Enforcer Mattress Fund. Oh
Hey.
man, the Mattress Fund.
And I thank you so much for support, Michael Thomas, and hopefully we will have a proper mattress to sleep on someday. A lot of people were bringing up a good point. Folks are sleeping under bridges, in cars, so it could be worse, and I'd agree with that. It could be worse. But man, and I never realized, because people always talked about air mattress this, air mattress that, oh, it sucks. And I was always like, an air mattress can't suck that bad. And I'm not gonna lie, it doesn't suck. It's just that it's not a comfortable sleep, because also ours have this little indention thing at the top. You know what I'm talking about, Matthew, and it's supposed to be simulating a pillow, but then you put a pillow on top of that. And just to let y'all know, my pillow that I have that I sleep on, I've had it ever since I was a baby, and it's a super flat pillow. It's a big pillow, but it's super flat. And I think it was just like that at the start, and it's really flat now. So I'm used to, when I sleep, a really, really flat position for my head. My head's not elevated. And so having that goofy thing below
I'm
my
not gonna
pillow,
lie, man. I honestly thought personally that the air mattress was super comfortable. Actually, it's more comfortable than my real mattress to be. I'm not lying about that. It's actually extremely comfortable to me. I've slept better in the air mattress than I have my real mattress.
man, I'm not gonna lie, man. I slept way better in that damn Amtrak roomette on the Coast Starlight than I have in this air mattress, man. I've had a better night's sleep on a train than I had on an air mattress, man. I had a good night's sleep for I think the first 2 nights on that thing, but since then it's been downhill since.
I'll honestly tell you the truth. I'm not as in a big a hurry to get off the air mattress as I think you are as well. But the only thing I don't like is literally sleeping next to the floor. That's the thing I don't like about it. If the air mattress was elevated, it would be much better off. But the air mattress was only what, $25 or something like that.
22.
To be able to sleep good. Yeah, to be able to sleep that good for that cheap, that's actually a really good deal, all the way around.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I'm saying that it's all right, but we do have to keep in context here. This thing costs about the price of an average meal these days, to have a bed. So that is pretty cool to think about, that you can just get an actual bed for 20-something bucks. The miracles of the modern economy. It truly is amazing. But beyond that, I will say I have had better sleep. And also another thing is that, just to throw this out there, Matthew, every single time the dogs walk, I can hear it, and it's really, really loud where I'm at. When literally I can hear the dog walking on the floor, and it will wake me up because it sounds like they're right beside the bed, and I'm like, dang. I'm like, man, I just wish the dogs didn't have nails that were clacking on the floor like horses. But anyways, with that, now I'm just getting into the nitty gritty, hair splitting kind of things. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a 5 and says, Happy Yom Kippur to my fellow Jews across the world, and Am Yisrael Chai. And LSA hit the like button, that's in order, and Slav Ukraine.
Hey, and happy Yom Kippur, by the way. That is going on right now, and I hope that you're having a great one, LSA Sergeant Figment, because you are actually one of the Jewish viewers that we have. And also, please, do make sure to hit the like button. We've gotten up to 3,100 likes, and hopefully we can get up even higher than that. Can we hit a record? I think we can. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Chris Sheridan, who puts in a 5 as well. And huge shout out to Chris for that support. And he says, $5, train choo-choo. And tell me about Trains of War. RF is closer to collapse now than ever before, right?
An interesting, Chris Sheridan, that you want to know about Trains of War. Trains of War are a very interesting thing of war. And I would have to tell you that war is a thing that trains are actually well accustomed to. A lot of people don't know that. And so, let me actually go to the American War Trains. And I'll show you something really cool. So, yeah. Here we go. These things are incredibly cool. So, back in the day, in the Civil War, they just were starting to develop real usable mortars. I mean, heavy siege mortars. And these things were so heavy, they couldn't be moved around in a conventional way by horse. So what they would do is that they would pull the mortar along on the railroads, like you can see right there. They would set the thing up, they would adjust the range, elevation, all of that on the railroad car, and then they would fire the mortar from the railroad car. Pretty cool, actually. This was like the first railroad artillery ever really used in the world, which is just incredibly neat. You can also see another example right there. This is actually a actual direct fire. It's a field gun that is set up on a railroad car that they fire at enemy forces. Like, it's actually crazy to think that they would do stuff like this back in the day, and during the Civil War, but this was probably one of the cooler uses, in my opinion, of trains in war, because it was like in the middle of the Victorian era. Like, this is one of the craziest things ever, and what's even crazier is that the armored trains just got even better as time kept going by. Like, they would outfit flat cars with literal small forts built on top of them with small cannons to be able to use against enemy forces. It's like the coolest thing ever. But then, moving on from that, trains started to get a lot more advanced, like World War One. Let's see, gun train. Let me see if I can find one of these. So in World War One, you started to see real proper railway cannons, like this 14-inch railway gun right here, that would be hauled into place, and they would fire these things at the enemy. The the Central Powers and the Allies all had these kinds of railroad artillery guns. And it's just cool to think that you just literally rolled around heavy artillery pieces back in the day, set them up into position, and then just started nuking people with them. Like, that's actually pretty wild to think about when you really imagine that. But it was an actual pretty common practice during World War One and World War Two, until a little bit later on, and then artillery pieces this size were unconventional, because then you had missile batteries that would do the job. But still, pretty cool. And then there were, of course, armored trains, but armored trains really weren't, like, a thing. You know, like railroad artillery trains were a thing, but armored trains kind of were niche. Like, there really isn't a place to use an armored train for the most part, in most places, that is. So let me see if I can actually show y'all a real proper armored train, or at least a picture one. You can actually see a Russian armored train right here that was used in Ukraine, which is pretty jank. Like, this is obsolete by this point, like this kind of a practice, especially with a gush gun. Like, what are you going to do with that? But let me see if I can get y'all a better picture. The Russian Empire and the Soviet Union were really big believers in armored trains. You can actually see a reproduction of an armored train right here in Russia. But we didn't really use them a lot. No one in the Western world and the Allies used these things a great deal, because there was really no point. The Germans kind of used them a bit, but those were mostly on the Eastern Front, and the Russians and the Soviets also used them as well, but just not a lot. Like, it just wasn't really an incredibly common thing. The Germans would send out patrols, though, in France on passenger railroad trains of just German soldiers and look for partisans, which is kind of trains in war of a sort, but not really like a special purpose-made train for the war. But with that, I hope that does address that part fairly well. And also, Russian forces closer to collapse now than ever. I'd say they're having a tough time, but they're probably not going to collapse anytime here soon. It'll probably be next year, well into next year, if we ever saw them getting close to collapse. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Avari Mandabratis, a channel legend. And thank you very much, Avari, for that $20 support. We appreciate it. And Avari says, how many rail yards are there in the greater Houston area? And start here at Wayside at Liberty in Houston, Texas, and then go north and then zoom out, and also southwest.
So let's see here. Wayside. So let's type this in so that way I can find it quickly. Wayside, Houston, Texas. Want to go here. The map will load. The internet's having a little bit of a tough time. Come on, Nelly. Work with me now. All right, so we got a rail yard right here. This appears to be a fairly sizable one, actually. It's operated by a BNSF. That looks like a BNSF Jeep 38. That's right there. And so it's doing some pretty normal yard work. They also have a locomotive maintenance facility and car maintenance facility right here, because you can see all the extra axles they have that can be replaced. This is a BNSF yard. It's actually the Houston South yard. And we can also see some sightings here for local industries, like this one right here that has a high-cube boxcar in it. But let's see here. What else do they have? So we have this rail yard here, operated by BNSF. So then you have a... that might be an interchange right there for Union Pacific, maybe. So we follow this down. We might be able to find another rail yard out here in the burbs. And I'm not seeing it yet. I don't think there's a rail yard out here in the burbs. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Let's see here. There is a railroad museum out here. Is it a good one? Bro, the Santa Fe worship in Texas is insane. They got that everywhere, man. Like, it's like, dude, Santa Fe dominates this place. Y'all love Santa Fe out here. That's actually pretty cool. But let's see here. We were in the South Yard over here, somewhere around here. Peter, the horse is here. So the rail yard was somewhere out here. So we're going to go up into central Houston because there has to be some kind of a rail. Yep, there is one. There's a little rail yard right here. Do we know the name of it? No, we don't. But it's a rail yard. It's a smaller one, though. And so, let's see. Do we have any others around the Houston area? Trying to make a quick eye out for them. Industrial areas usually have rail yards nearby. I didn't see one there. But you can see some little industrial spurs right here that go off the main line, which is pretty unique. Well, not really unique, but it is pretty cool. Is that intermodal? Wow, they're just moving intermodal right through the middle in like a mixed consist. That's really unique. Like, where is that going, though? Oh, we have another rail yard up. Well, I don't know if this is really a rail yard. It really isn't. I
Also,
think...
Vari said that was a small one. Find the intersection and go west, and plus Pasadena area in Galveston.
So let's see here. Let's go out to Galveston. Let's see. Here's Galveston down here. So this is another BNSF rail yard. This one appears to be really busy, of course, because it's by a port. So they're probably loading, unloading, and offloading loads of stuff. Yep, there we go. There we go, Matthew. This is what I was looking for. Oh my God. Is this where they put all of their locomotives to die? Because there's like a million different... There's like the BNSF executive liveries. Like, you even have Santa Fe stuff in here. This must be like the graveyard for BNSF in this area, because like anything and everything is dropped off here. They even have a war bonnet right there that's faded out. Pretty freaking cool. I mean, like, this would actually be pretty cool to see in real life, although the stuff is rusted to hell. Oh my God, it just keeps going. Man, you can find anything you want from BNSF down here. You could probably buy one of these off of them for like 50 grand probably at that point. But this is a huge rail yard down here. And of course, servicing the local port. It looks like a lot of aggregate stuff. But let's see here. What else do we have outside of that? We have another rail yard right here. This is a Texas City Terminal Railway. What is that? Is that one of those little short line things that y'all have out there? That would be cool if it is. You know, got the refinery. There's got to be there. Yeah, there's a rail yard in here. Well, more like a holding yard, but it's kind of a rail yard. But that is really cool. That's a huge refinery, by the way. That thing's like as big as the one in Baton Rouge. And then let's see, what else do we have? I mean, there are loads of rail yards around here. You'd have to assume there is because of the population density and the amount of cargo that would just be needed to keep this place running. But it is a load. It's like a legitimate, large amount of rail yards. So let's see, what do we have? Oh, we got another one here. Man, oil cars are like y'all's thing down here, isn't it? Oil cars and hoppers. That's like all y'all have, and then some intermodal. Oh, really like the double stack well cars, but man, that's pretty cool. So let's see here. What else? There's got to be a couple others. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because we do have a couple of others, super chats that we do have to get to. While I study my way through that, I have a stamma, and we also have a mega rail yard right here. Where is this? So this is just east of Houston. Oh my God, dude, look at this thing. This thing's like the size of the city.
That's massive.
Man, that thing is big. This is literally the mega rail yard right here. This one's run by Union Pacific. You can see it right here. It's the Inglewood yard of Union Pacific. But let's see. What do y'all have? high cube boxcars of the TTX variety, a leaser company. Then you have the gondolas of scrap. You have a load of oil cars, loads of hoppers. Uh, no double stack well cars. None that I see. But loads of hoppers and oil cars. That's like all there is, and it's just crazy. Like to look at this. This is insane, actually. Where in the world is there a locomotive servicing here? Oh, look at this, Matthew. By the way, I forgot to tell you this, but some of the track segments, like switches, are like kind of pre-made. So it's almost like a giant model railroad. You literally just drop these things off to the side if you're not using them, and then just kind of plop them in and bolt them together whenever you expand it.
That's pretty cool, man. Like that's the way I would probably do if I was building a railroad, just drop and drag.
Yeah, man, they literally like look, you can literally see the giant rail segments out here. It's really cool how they do it actually. But you know, usually they kind of build them on the spot, but you can also do this as well. But let's see. Where in the world there's got to be a locomotive servicing facility for a yard this big. And I'm guessing it's right here. Because this looks like the place. Like you can see where there would be servicing done here. So I guess this is it. But usually here in the south, like over here in the southeast, there's usually like a turntable nearby in some of them. Like I think our Norris yard here near Irondale actually has a turntable in it. So let me see. This is considered, by the way, a huge rail yard for the Alabama area. This is actually one of the busiest ones in the southeast on top of that. Like a humble flex right there. Let me make sure that's the right one. Yeah, that would be it. It's at Irondale. Wait a minute. Yeah, that's it. That's the one in Irondale. So let me see if I can show that to y'all, and it should be somewhere around. Here it is. There it is. Our little turnstile. It's right there. But we have a decent amount of these here in the southeast. They're like at every rail yard. I don't know why they still have them because they really don't need them, but still pretty cool. And they have a huge locomotive servicing facility at the Norris yard here in Irondale. It's like endless amounts of anything Norfolk Southern that you can imagine, and some leasers, some foreign power from other railroad companies. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I've already made Bros and allowing me to be a bit of a foamer for just a little bit. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Wyatt Logan, who puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much, Wyatt, for the $10 support. And he said, in 2040, I will proudly wave my LSA flag on the National Mall, and will we be able to be part of the presidential parade? And that would be cool, unlike Chris's mom.
Oh! Oh my goodness, Chris's mom is catching strays, which is something that she also doesn't realize. But beyond that, I got to thank you so much for the support. And I would have to say, yes, y'all would be a part of the presidential parade. Anyone who's a part of the LSA would be a part of that parade. I think that would be incredibly cool to see and a great homage to where we would have all come from to get to that point. That would be incredibly neat. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, Wyatt Logan. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, I just saw this in the live chat here. I see that a fellow by the name of Philip Boardman said, I wish my dad, Joe Boardman, was still alive. He was the CEO of Amtrak, and I could get him to talk to the enforcers.
Oh!
Is that for real? Like, pull this up. Joe Boardman. Like, pull that name up real quick.
Let's see here. Joe Boardman. Let's see here. I think this is our guy here. Oh my God! Oh, no, he's real. He's real.
Oh wow! So that's the son of the former Amtrak CEO. Well, that's very cool, actually.
That is so
well, that's
cool.
Unfortunate. Apparently he's passed. I'm sorry for your loss, Philip. By the way, but wow, that's very impressive.
That is incredibly cool. I hate to hear that he passed, though, in 2019. Rest in peace to him. But that is so cool. There's not a lot of CEOs out there for Amtrak. And he was a long-serving one. He was in the position for like 8 straight years. So, wow. You know, that's just incredibly cool. I wish I could have been able to talk to him, because one thing I've actually floated around with Matthew in the background, like it was like a quick, like, I haven't floated around a lot. It wasn't a serious thing. It was just kind of one of those things. I would be like, hey, wouldn't it be neat? I was like, hey, wouldn't it be neat if we were able to make like a really cool video with Amtrak, like showing how they train their engineers and like showing how the railroad runs, or like how passenger rail runs these days. I was like, wouldn't that be neat? And then I kind of like just threw that idea away because we got so much on our plate already. But that would have been incredibly cool to be able to talk to someone like this. One of the CEOs of Amtrak. That is so freaking cool that your dad did that. I would have to say, I would be wildly proud of my dad if he was the CEO of Amtrak. Like, that's just an incredibly cool position to hold. And it's really cool to know that his son is here right now, because I have a massive affinity for Amtrak. Matthew isn't that big of a fan of Amtrak, but I love Amtrak. Like, I adore the concept of Amtrak, like the whole passenger rail thing. And it's really cool to know that your dad was the CEO of that. That is so freaking cool. And I wish I could have been able to talk to him. We literally started running this channel just 2 years after he passed, and I would have loved to have been able to talk to someone who had been in a position like that. In pass, like, that is the position in American passenger rail. That's it. Like, there's no position that's higher than this. Like, Brightline, not even close. Doesn't even run the mileage that Amtrak runs. This is just incredibly cool. And I got to thank you so much for throwing that out. Like, the fact that you're his son, that's incredibly cool. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this one goes to Kachulian343, who puts in a $5 donation, and thank you very much, Kachulian, for that support. They said Putin is too busy getting his butt kicked by Ukraine to take time out of his day to get his butt kicked by NATO too, and it's empty threats and limp pee-pee.
Get your hands off my weenus! By me on that, I gotta say, thank you for the support, Kachulian, and I would agree with that completely. He's kind of getting beat around by everyone. He doesn't want to get beat around by NATO too. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to CK Bold, who orders the regular, the number 5, and says take a live chat question. And thank you very much, CK Bold, for that support as always. And the live chat question is going to go to Epic Trains Canada, who says roughly how many Russian oil depots have been destroyed at this point.
Let's see, how many Russian, quite a lot of them. We don't know the exact number, sadly, so I can't really give you that off the top of my head, but still a pretty decent amount from what we know. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Cinnamon Bob, who puts in a $5 donation, and huge shout out to Cinnamon Bob for that support. He said Putin is just scared of Belgian superweapon, a intercontinental waffle launcher, LOL, and a question for the live chat, please.
And I gotta say, thank you so much for the support, Cinnamon Bob, and I would have to say he's probably scared of the waffle launcher. I would be scared of the waffle launcher as well. I rather like pancakes. But beyond that, we will make sure to take a question from the chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
And this one goes to Seba, who says, does Kadyrov have a force similar to the FSB?
Not really, no. The best he has is Akhmat, and that's not really close to the abilities of the FSB, to be entirely honest. And so with that, I hope that does address that live chat fairly well, and I thank you once again for support and help this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we are going to give a very big shout out to Rosello Jr. Valera, who put in a 5, along with Mama Mentality and Marc-Andre Burnett, who put in a $3 donation. And we also had a 2 from Plazath, as well as Jason Carney. And then we had a $1 donation from Nick Nelson, as well as Yisrael, and also Marc-Andre Burnett. And a huge shout out to all 7 of you for that support. And we appreciate it very much because, of course, the support helps keep the channel running. And that is what makes the whole thing go around. Not really, because we do, of course, we'll run the stream anyway, like the Enforcer says, even without the donations. But of course, it's the donations that keep us basically employed doing this as a job. So we appreciate it very much. And our next one here goes to
You cut out right there, Matthew.
Martin, who puts in a $5 donation. And thank you.
And hello?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
And Martin put in that 5 and says, how many more replacement chiefs of Hamas does the IDF have to off before the 2 guys from Gray Zone are called up off the bench? And Aren and is 9010 Steve.
And I would have to say they're probably going to have to call up maybe about 6 more, because that's all the guys left in Hezbollah. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And I think it wants to give us support and help this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Plazath, who puts in a 5 and says, a mattress fund.
Hey, and I thank you so much for support, Plazath, for the mattress fund, because mattresses are greatly appreciated. We love mattresses. And so thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to John Scott, who puts in a 2 and says, LSA forever.
And LSA forever, John Scott. And I thank you so much once again for being a part of the LSA and enjoying it enough to support it and help it to be possible. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now running this show. Each and every single person counts. And I thank you so much once again for helping to be one of those people and helping us to keep this thing running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Martin once again, who puts in a 2 and says, if Russia gets shells from Kim, is Belarus out of ammo?
Belarus may actually be mostly out of ammo, or they may be so strategically depleted they really don't have the ability to give Russia any more without completely destroying their ability to fight in any possible future conflict that is coming up. So yeah, they may actually be out of ammo, or it may be that the North Koreans just have it in bulk and the Russians are wanting to buy in bulk. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are now moving on into our live chat questions. But before we do, I do have to say that due to time constraints, we're only going to be able to address the Morse code decoders and 3 live chat questions, and then we're going to be rounding this thing out. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, and for the Morse code decoders of the stream tonight, we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Royal Fluffiness, and Arabella Garbo, the entire roster of Morse code decoders tonight, and they said it reads, let's see, Kadyrov, I think meant to say Kadyrov, almost got capped by them Russian goons and decided to try and cap them back. LLT LSA, hashtag plus begin underscore.
And there's the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all for getting that Morse code message correct on the 961st day of the war, because all of y'all have continued to get that message right for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of days. And it's really shocking that y'all have. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. We are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Judy, who says, do you think the blood feud will help stop the war in Ukraine?
I don't really think it will, but it will certainly be causing a lot of chaos behind the scenes in Russia and tying up a lot of resources and manpower. So in a big picture sense, it might help to end the war, but it's not going to be like an immediate thing where that starts and the Ukraine war ends, sort of a deal. And so with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. We are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one's going to go to Seymour, who says, what will happen if Israel uses Arab airspace to attack Iran?
Probably nothing, because while a lot of countries seem to not be happy with that idea, there's really not a lot they can do, because most of these countries don't have an ability to shoot down Israeli aircraft. Like, they just don't have the weaponry for it. So probably not a lot would happen. Like, countries would be unhappy, but that would be about it, and then they'd have to cry about it. And that's something that everyone's a master of over there in the Middle East, is just crying about stuff, because they really have no way to stop it. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be Robert Rhodes, who says, so if Chechnyan rebels against Russia, then what does that mean for Chechen soldiers currently on the front lines in Ukraine?
It probably means something similar to what happened with the Wagner PMC, where they just start driving to Moscow, or they give up their positions on the front line and just start fighting the nearest Russians to them. That could be the case. We're not really sure, though, but I have a feeling if history is anything to go by, most likely they would turn into the Wagner and they would just start racing towards Moscow to try and overthrow the Russian government, or do something similar along those lines, or find those lawmakers and kill them. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And we've reached the end of tonight's stream. 3 hours and 20 minutes after it started, and what a night stream it has been. I get to thank everyone so much once again for watching. At the peak tonight, there was 8.7 thousand people here again, just like there was last night, and 61,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. We are entirely honored and humbled to know that so many of y'all continue to choose this channel to be your primary source of news. And we are always going to be honored and greatly appreciative of all of y'all continuing to watch this channel. If you're new tonight, and you enjoyed this channel and the way we covered this news, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because it makes us very happy when folks do, and we just love to see it. And so with that, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks. The LSA shall never die, and we'll always persevere no matter what to make sure we're bringing the streams and the videos to you as stuff happens every single day, no matter what. Tired or not, we're like the post office. We're going every single day through the sleet, snow, and whatever it is. We're going through it. And once again, thank you all for watching tonight, and we'll see you all tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern on the next night of War News streaming. And also, I'll see you midday tomorrow as well for a short war summary if there is, of course, enough news to cover. But with that, Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava, get some rest, and we'll see you tomorrow. Get some rest, and good night.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.